Good, I'm glad. Yeah, he's on. Okay, let's start the council meeting with roll call. Kelly?
Thank you. Councilmember Romack.
Here.
Councilmember Henderson.
Here.
Councilmember Pallavi.
Here.
Vice Mayor Klostad.
Here.
And Mayor Zabriskie.
Here.
Thank you.
Would you now stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? We have items on a consent calendar and 2 items on a for discussion. Now is the time for general comments on anything that is not on the agenda. And the 2 things we have on the agenda are a fire hazard severity zone and the homeless action plan. So anything having to do with something other than those 2 items, now is your opportunity to make public comment. Would you please say your name? You'll then have 3 minutes to speak. And please proceed. Don't be shy. And there's a button there. Make sure the green light's on.
My profound apologies, Mayor Zabriskie and council members, for violating your timetable. But let me continue. You've had my spiel on the evening, and then the following morning, you wake up, it's gridlock. There are trucks everywhere. It's jammed. The school bus can't come in to pick up the ACMS kids. The bus can't come up, get people to work. We cannot go about our business. We can't get out. And this lasted for an extended period. And it's hard to imagine what would have happened if we'd had an emergency, a medical event or a fire, because the emergency services would not have been able to get in. I say all this just as an introduction to the point that this problem needs to be fixed. Me, a 76-year-old homeowner, has no way of dealing with it. I can't go and fight with truck drivers. We need help from the town to fix this problem. And I know there have been some initial contacts, but please, please, please help us. Thank you.
Hi. My name is Jessica Stevens, and I live on the backside of Donner Lake. I'm here to speak about the Donner Lake traffic situation. That seems to be a theme. First of all, thank you all for your service, and thank you all to everybody in the room showing up to help govern our town. It's a special place, and I'm excited to see what other positive changes we can make. If you were not here earlier, you may not be aware that there was an 80-person petition that was submitted earlier in the meeting, which I was not present for. I believe you all have a copy, and I've spoken to many of you in person about the topic. I just wanted to take a moment and share my personal experience. Daily at Donner Lake, just taking my son to school or whatever, I'm passed on a double yellow line by speeding traffic. I understand that judging someone else's speed is not necessarily something that you can objectively do, but when you have your speedometer set and people are passing you on a double yellow line at a high rate of speed, I think it's safe to say that there is a speeding problem there. I have spoken with Chief Renfro and appreciate the phone call back that I got about the topic, but have also been pretty dismissed. I'm hoping now that we have 80 people speaking up and using their voices that we can call for some real action, because there's a lot of space for something that can actually be done short-term and long-term. Other concerns, aggressive U-turns while people compete for docks. I think we can all agree that there's an over-tourism issue. We need to address the parking and the traffic situation. Like, there's no way around it. Like, it's become untenable. I don't allow my son to ride his bike at Donner Lake anymore. I can go on, but there's a lot of comments within the document that we submitted, and we're gonna keep beating the dead horse. So I know it's been beaten today, but we're gonna keep going until we actually have something done, because to the best of my knowledge, there hasn't really been much done, and I think there's a lot more that we can be done. I also spoke with the Tahoe the Park District, and I did appreciate that I got a phone call back, but I have never heard anyone in this politically active town be more dismissive and also like unwilling to take responsibility for the fact that it is the wonderful dock facilities that they provide that are actually creating the problem as people constantly compete for them. I personally don't go there anymore. It's what it is. It'd be nice if they could step up and take responsibility, and if we're gonna do anything there, there's gonna have to be some level of financial responsibility there. Let's see, what else? Truckee has the money to do so many wonderful things. How great is that, right? We're so fortunate in that way, but like, how long are we gonna let people be run over? Like there was a fatality, so we appreciate your help. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Ms. Stevens.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. My name is Sherry Lewis, and I have operated a hosted rental since 2020. I've maintained the required permit until April 1st, paid all taxes and fees, and rented the master suite of my home with the homeowner's written approval through Airbnb. However, due to the regulation change on April 1st, my permit was not renewed, significantly impacting my livelihood. While I understand the council cannot add items to tonight's agenda, you are permitted to offer comments and ask questions. My appeal hearing with the town staff is scheduled for May 1st. It appears the new regulations may inadvertently discriminate against renters like me, as there's no explicit prohibition, but also no clear mechanism to verify full-time residency. During the November 12th Town Council meeting, discussing the only 26 hosted rentals, this is how many homes were impacted by this, Acting Mayor Jabrinsky at the time stated, I had been thinking in terms of the single elderly individual who is renting a home because they need the income. I'm imagining people who are renting specifically because they need the income. Otherwise, you know your privacy is being invaded. I don't see it being so much as being a profit motive as a necessity motive. That's me, sir. Similarly, Councilmember Klovstad noted, these are not problem childs. If this becomes a problem, obviously we can always reconsider it, but I don't see a need to overly restrict this at this time. End of quote. My hosted rental is operated for 5 years without complaints or issues, and my neighbors can confirm this. I have a neighbor here with me. I respectfully request clarity on the council's intent to guide my upcoming appeal. Did the council intend to eliminate renters as operators of hosted rentals?
Thank you, Ms. Lewis.
Oh, thank you. Hi. My name is Julie Arsenault. I'm a homeowner in Coldstream. So we bought and moved in September of this year. It was our first winter. Love the community. It's a wonderful place to be. But I'm here to speak about the truck issue that happens during snowstorms. So it's any time that there's chain control or if the freeway is closed, particularly when there's chain control at Donner Pass Road there in Truckee. And basically the issue is that the trucks end up coming into our neighborhood. They block the roadways, they park, they drive around our very narrow streets trying to find a way to turn around and get out. So I think a lot of them don't want to be there, but some I think are also trying to find a place to wait out the storm. And it creates obviously a safety issue where the roadways are blocked, we can't get in, people can't get out, emergency services can't come in, the school bus can't come in, TART can't access the neighborhood, our snow clearing services can't come in. So it creates quite a big problem for us. And I know that the police department does come out, but that's also a burden on them. And I think we're just kind of trying, our HOA and our homeowners are trying to come together and figure out what is a better long-term solution for this. And I think we would really love if, people from the town could work with us to figure out a solution and ideally kind of come together, find a way, and ideally loop in some state resources as well. Because I do think a big part of the issue here is Caltrans, we have heard that Caltrans is directing the trucks to actually go into our neighborhood, which is not allowed. And so I think there's also potentially some ways to also work with state resources to help solve this problem too. So if we could kind of find a way to come together, problem solve, and figure out some more sustainable solutions, that would be great. I know we had signs this year, and I think they helped, but also they were a bit hard to see, and it definitely did not solve the problem. So thanks for the time listening, and looking forward to hopefully finding a way to work together on this. Thank you.
Thank you, for Ms. Hartnell.
Hello, my name is Ben Stewart. Thanks for having me here. I'm also from the Coldstream community and wanted to share similar perspective to others that have spoken and just highlight how important it is for us to find resolution to the issues around ingress and egress to the neighborhood. And likewise, I think we could bring in state resources and coordinate with the agencies that are contributing to some of the challenges and we believe could help with the solutions as well. So look forward to working with the town to find something and a path forward.
Thank you, Mr. Stewart.
Hi, my name is Karen Cowenhoven. I'm the association manager at Coldstream Master Association. I've been dealing with this for 3 years now with this association. It has gotten considerably worse this year to the point where a truck driver started spitting at me and coming after me. And I had already called 911 and I was told this was not an emergency. And then I called them back and said, well, now I've been assaulted. So now please send a police officer because this is not safe. When we can't get in and our owners can't get in or out, the apartments, people can't get in or out, it is a huge safety issue. The apartments have people that live there that require ambulances to be able to come in and out. They have had that happen numerous times during snowstorms. On March 17th, it took 20 minutes for the trucks to get out. The amount of damage they have done to our association, we're at over $26,000 to date in 3 years. That is a lot of money that our homeowners, our 30 homeowners, are currently having to pay to fix the problem that Caltrans is creating. Caltrans is not willing to help us solve this problem. They are pushing it all back on the town of Truckee, unless the town of Truckee asks for their help. This year, Officer Ruano caught Caltrans actually telling people to get off and come sit in our association or go turn around. Our traffic circle is not large enough for big rigs to turn around. They have damaged electrical. They have shattered a 15-inch storm drain pipe 6 feet down in the ground. We had dogs getting caught in this pipe, in this hole, because it would get uncovered. It is not safe. These big rigs need to be kept on the highway. If they are told to get off the highway onto our city streets, we need to then have Caltrans paying the town to have them directed back onto the freeway. You guys have done a great job keeping them off of the streets on Donner Pass Road, so you can drive down that now. We now need that help in our association. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Karen. Okay, that looks like all the general public comments. And now we'll go on to presentations, starting with recognition of the Wildfire Awareness Month. James, can you join me at the podium? James is here to accept a proclamation. James Blattler, here to accept a proclamation as the Emergency Services Coordinator on behalf of the town. Proclamation is, whereas over the last 7 years, California has suffered from the most destructive, deadliest, and largest wildfires in state history. And whereas wildfire poses a significant threat to lives, property, the environment, and the vitality of both our town and region. And whereas the town of Truckee recognizes the critical importance of wildfire prevention, mitigation, preparedness, and safety in our vulnerable mountain community. And whereas the town of Truckee is committed to increasing awareness about wildfire risks, improving community education, and supporting local wildfire mitigation efforts. And whereas local, state, and federal agencies, including fire service, law enforcement, emergency services, special districts, and community organizations work tirelessly to protect our community, but the safety for all residents and visitors relies on efforts from the whole community. And whereas it is essential that all community members take proactive steps to safeguard their homes, businesses, neighborhoods, and precious natural areas through the creation of a wildfire action plan, along with defensible space and home hardening improvements. And whereas the town encourages all residents, workers, and visitors in Truckee to sign up for emergency alerts and know their evacuation zone before a wildfire occurs. And now, therefore, be it proclaimed by the mayor of the town of Truckee that May 25 is Wildfire Awareness Month. And we encourage all residents, businesses, and visitors to participate in the numerous educational activities and local initiations offered in May to be ready for wildfire this coming fire season, to help improve the resilience of our community. And so I would like to present James, and you have with you
Steve Casman, Truckee Fire Marshal.
Thank you, Steve. Steve Casman, Truckee Fire Marshal. I'd like to present you with this plaque. Thank you. And James, would you just say a few words?
Just a few words, because I know it's been a long day already and a long night ahead. So out of character, I even prepared notes to keep me pithy. So, but first, I just wanted to thank the mayor and council for choosing to highlight Wildfire Awareness Month and continuing to prioritize the efforts to help us all be protected against wildfire. As mentioned in the proclamation, wildfire awareness and prevention is a whole community effort, and I wanted to highlight a couple people and organizations, specifically thanking the Truckee Fire Protection District, Fire Marshal Steve Kessman here. He leads the efforts in wildfire prevention, or fire prevention, including wildfire prevention here for Truckee. And I know that the job of Fire Marshal is a very often thankless job, but when we have people like Fire Marshal Kessman here take it as seriously as he does, we're all much better protected. So also wanted to highlight Ann Rarick with the Tahoe Truckee Community Organizations Active in Disasters, also known as COAD. She couldn't make it here tonight, but the work that she does to help connect with our community organizations and our community members, meeting them where they are, especially the non-English speakers, and helping make sure that they sign up for emergency alerts is really incredible. Finally, I just wanted to share some of the many wildfire events that we're going to be offering, or at least participating in, over the next month in May. The capstone event will be a wildfire forum. It's going to be hosted by Tahoe Donner, but it's open to the whole community on May 21st. Additionally, we'll be at the Truckee Rec and Park District Golden Meet and Greet on May 29th. We'll be attending several Firewise community and HOA specific meetings, including the property managers coffee chat on May 19th, the Prosser Lakeview and Woods Firewise meeting on May 31st, the Donner Lake Firewise Communities on May 17th, going to the Truckee Senior Apartments on May 14th, and then also attending the Tahoe Donner Association Happy Hour on May 23rd. And we're working with the Truckee Donner Horsemen and the Nevada County Sheriff's Office for a large animal evacuation event that'll likely happen in June. And finally, to close, I wanted to make sure everybody's aware of the many green waste removal programs that are available to everyone here in Truckee and the surrounding areas, including cart pickups, drop-offs, rentals, and reimbursements for carts. And so go to keeptruckeegreen.org for more information on that. Thank you very much.
We want to get a candid. Steve. And we have one other proclamation this evening for Earth Day. So whereas Earth, oh, and can we bring on, Kelly, do we have them?
There you go, Mayor.
Trying to, there we go. And with us tonight is, could you go ahead and state your name?
Hello, my name is Vidal Wyatt. I'm with the Washoe Tribe in Nevada, California.
Thank you for being here with us tonight and for accepting this proclamation. So, whereas Earth Day is celebrated each year to raise awareness about environmental issues and promote actions towards climate resilience, resource conservation, and protection of ecosystems, and whereas the land we now call Truckee and the surrounding region have long been the homelands of the Washoe people who since time immemorial have lived in reciprocal relationship with this land, guided by values of respect, responsibility, and interdependence with the natural world. And whereas Washoe creation story tells a Jaiwe, guiding the people to their home at Da'a, where they were instructed by Neusu to care for the land and to live in harmony with the plants, animals, and medicines that grew strong for them. And whereas the center of the Washoe world, both geographically and spiritually, is Da'a, and their cultural traditions, language, and identity remain deeply rooted in this land. And whereas despite generations of disruption due to colonization, resource extraction, and forced assimilation, the Washoe Tribe of Nevada and California continues to revitalize its language, restore cultural lifeways, and lead efforts in environmental protection through education, stewardship, and community resilience. And whereas the Washoe Environmental Protection Department's annual Washoe Earth Day is Saturday, May 3, 2025, which will bring together tribal members, local agencies, and partners in a shared celebration of environmental awareness, youth engagement, and land stewardship, reinforcing the enduring relationship between the Washoe people and their ancestral homelands. And whereas the town of Truckee recognizes and affirms the importance of honoring the historical and present day contributions of the Washoe as originally stewards of the land we now inhabit, now, therefore, be it proclaimed by the Mayor of Truckee that April 22, 2025 is Earth Day, and that the town of Truckee honors the Washoe Tribe of Nevada and California for its ongoing leadership in land stewardship and environmental education, and encourages all residents to support and participate in activities that protect our environment, uplift Indigenous voices, and strengthen our collective resilience. So it is my pleasure to present you with the plaque virtually, since we can't do it otherwise. And thank you for accepting the plaque on behalf of the Washoe.
Yes, thank you. And thank you, Mayor, and then thank you, Town of Truckee. On behalf of the Washoe Tribe, we appreciate your recognition and look forward to being back home. Thank you.
Of course, and welcome back.
I think I'll just go right into incentive awards while you're making your way back, since we have a large agenda tonight and a big conversation. As the council knows, this is our quarterly employee incentive awards, where employees nominate each other for work that they've done in the quarter that goes above and beyond and is in alignment with our core values as a town organization of integrity, teamwork, accountability, commitment, and excellence. These recipients were recognized during our last quarterly employee meeting, which happened a couple weeks ago. So I'm excited to share with you, we have a number of recognitions. First, we have Alex Alex and Ruby. Alex is started out as an intern for us, and so didn't Ruby, and they've transitioned into temporary employees for us. And they were both nominated because they've really gone above and beyond to support our communications efforts. So any of you that saw our budget reel that we put on last year during budget cycle after adoption, and any of the videos talking about daylight savings time, our Trails Grant program, that is really Alex and Ruby coming together and helping to provide some support for our communications team, which is a team of one person. So it's essential to have that additional support. So we thank Alex and Ruby for that. Aldana Fernandez, and Aldana was actually nominated by two separate employees. Aldana's a member of our Employee Engagement Committee, and that's a committee that we have of employees that think of interactive engagement ideas for cross-departmental interaction and just kind of a good culture in our workplace. Aldana's part of that committee, but she's always looking for creative ways to add that fun element and inclusive element into our workplace. She's consistently stepped up to take on responsibilities and bring fresh ideas that boost morale and create more connected workplace. And through her passion and dedication, Aldana exemplifies the town's core values of commitment and teamwork. Her contributions go beyond just planning activities. She's actively shaping a work environment that prioritizes inclusion, well-being, and engagement. So we thank Aldana for all of her creative spirit and energy that she's bringing to the Employee Engagement Committee. Next, we have James Flatler, who made it up here just in time. So congratulations, James. And James was nominated for his integrity, teamwork, and commitment, particularly in our efforts to strengthen our disaster preparedness and emergency response efforts. James was instrumental in modernizing our approach to emergency management. He's worked closely with IT, who nominated him for this recognition, to develop disaster recovery solutions that improve our resilience and have been proactive in ensuring town staff receive FEMA and ICS training so we're better equipped to respond to emergencies. He's worked closely with Nevada County to secure funding for build out of a new emergency operations center, and has led efforts to select technology that enhances functionality and accessibility. So thank you, James, for all your work in these areas. We also had nominated and recognized Christine Picard, who's in our HR department. And Christine was recognized for teamwork and excellence. She participates in all our employee interviews for new employees, new employee onboarding, employee engagement committee, North Tahoe leadership, strengths championing, all with the energy that resembles an active 5-year-old. She's very enthusiastic, very positive, and is just a bright light in our work organization, and we really appreciate the energy that she brings to our organization and to the Employee Engagement Committee as well. We recognize Bonnie Thompson-Hardin, who is also in our HR department. We had a challenging situation arise with one of our retired annuitants that we bring back for seasonal snow removal. And Bonnie ended up spending a lot of time working through that issue with CalPERS so that the employee was all set with their work situation, and the town was doing everything by the CalPERS rules as well. So we thank Bonnie for going above and beyond, and somewhat of an unusual circumstance for us. And then lastly, we have Rosie Johnson, and she was nominated by one of our newer employees, Mike Carr, who's our code enforcement staff person within short-term rentals. And Mike nominated Rosie for just being a great leader in the short-term rental division and being so warm and welcoming and supportive of him coming on board in the organization and helping him learn his role and what his job function is. So a lot of great nominations this quarter, and that's all I have.
Thank you, Jen. And then do we have a town manager's report?
We do. We have several opportunities for engagement in the coming weeks. But first, happy Earth Day to everybody. I know we announced that in the budget meeting, but for everybody that's here, happy Earth Day. Our single-use water bottle ordinance goes into effect today, so you can no longer buy single-use plastic water bottles in the town of Truckee. So there's been lots of communication out about that, but if you have any questions, you're welcome to reach out to town staff. If you are interested in learning more about the town's budget process, the quarterly talk with the town that we put on with the chamber, it's held up at the Lift workstation, is all about demystifying the town of Truckee's budget process. So Nikki will be presenting. You're welcome to attend that. The chamber asks that you do register for that, just so we make sure we have enough space, and you can do that on their webpage. On let's see, Tuesday of next week in this room from 1 to 5 p.m., we will be hosting a joint jurisdictional meeting. Nevada County, Nevada City, Grass Valley, and Town of Truckee will all be in here talking about transportation and connectivity. So if you're interested in those topics and like to learn what the region is doing in regards to transportation, biking, and trails, there's an opportunity to participate in that event. I skipped over this Thursday is the first Truckee Litter Corps is coming back. So from 4:30 to 6:30 p.m. down at Drink Coffee Do Stuff, you can participate in Truckee Litter Corps and help keep our community clean. And then next week on May 1st, right outside Chambers, as you come up the stairs, there'll be a reception for a Dark Skies art exhibit. That's student artwork that they've been working on through the SWEAT program about the importance of dark skies. And so we'll be doing a ribbon cutting for that exhibit and welcome the community to come and participate in that. And that is from 3:30 to 5 o'clock. That's all I have.
Thank you. And this is an opportunity for any public comments on the presentation portion of the calendar, which means either of the two proclamations, the manager's report, or the employee incentive awards. If anyone would like to comment, please come up to the podium. I don't see anyone approaching. So what we'll do next is move to the consent calendar.
Before you do that, can council make comments on?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, of course.
Okay,
Thank
really
you for
quick. Just because we have such a full house tonight, which we don't often have, it's lovely to see you all here. Thank you. Just in light of the Wildfire Awareness Month proclamation, I wanted to share some information really quickly. In the state of California, we have 33 million acres of forests, and of those, approximately 20 million are managed by our federal agencies, the Forest Service, BLM, and national parks. The level of investment to achieve resilience in our forests to prevent catastrophic wildfire has been estimated at $4 billion annually in California alone for the next several years. So right now, the state spends approximately $600 million annually, and the federal government prior to the IRA and IIJA, which was a big investment, spent about $100 million annually. So there is a tremendous funding gap to be able to prevent catastrophic wildfire in our region. And it really takes all of us, federal, state, local, and private sector. So I just wanted to give you all an update. In early March, this council adopted a resolution opposing the federal funding and staffing cuts and freezes to the agencies that manage our public lands that surround Truckee because of that very real threat of a large-scale wildfire that could impact not just Truckee, but the Sierra Nevada as a whole. And given the proclamation tonight, I want to share that 13 jurisdictions very promptly followed suit and joined the town of Truckee in solidarity to demonstrate how important this funding is to our region and to preventing the threat of wildfire. Town of Mammoth Lakes, Portola, Nevada City, Grass Valley, Nevada County, several of our local special districts from airport to school, PUD, hospital, Truckee Fire, Truckee Sanitary, TTSA, and others. Several other jurisdictions are working on drafting their resolutions and agendizing these, from Humboldt County to Tuolumne County Board of Supervisors and others. This really isn't just about Truckee. It's about our region, right? Just as we are one region, we are one California. And wildfire, the threats to our wildfire insurance, it impacts all of us. So I'm telling you this because Mayor Zabriskie and I met with our congressional representative, Representative Kiley, just last Friday to advocate for restoration of funding and the release of funding that has already been committed to specific projects, which we haven't yet actually had flow in, basically. We're going to continue advocating for this, and it's really important that we hear your voices in all of this. For the 4 hours prior to the meeting tonight, we talked about the town's budget. We're moving into budgeting right now. And local jurisdictions really have to step up in their budgeting because of these huge funding gaps and because we're losing federal dollars that are critical to these partnerships for achieving these wildfire mitigation projects. So you all have a voice in how this town spends taxpayer dollars. You all have a voice in budgeting and the investments that this town makes. We'll be going into additional budgeting meetings very, very promptly in May and into early June. And I just encourage you all, if you care about this, if wildfire is a top concern for you, if you're worried about it, if you're anxious about your wildfire insurance, if you've been dropped, come to those meetings, just like you're here tonight. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Courtney. Do any other council members have anything to say? Okay. We'll move on to the consent calendar. There are 5 items. The first one is minutes of our last council meeting on April 8th. Next one is Nevada County Transportation Commission's fiscal year overall work program. The third one is existing building decarbonization roadmap. The fourth one is the 2025 Truckee Dirt Trail Grant Awards. And the last one is the Truckee Police Department's Policy 709, compliance with state legislation under AB 481. And we have the staff recommendations before us on each of these 5 items. Does anyone on the council wish to pull any of these items? Does anyone on the staff wish to pull any of these items?
No, Mayor.
Is there anyone in the public who wishes to pull any of these items? Okay. Seeing no one, do I have a motion on the consent calendar?
I move that we pass the consent calendar.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Unanimous. Okay, now we'll move on to the discussion items. That's the first one is 7.1, introduction of the ordinance regarding fire hazard severity zone classifications. The recommendation is that the council introduce an ordinance adopting the state's recommended fire hazard severity zone map and amend the chapter of the town municipal code accordingly. And James Blattler is here again with us, and he'll lead our discussion for the staff. Thank you.
Hello again, Mayor and Council. Third time for the night, which is definitely a record for me. And I appreciate your attention to this. So I'm here to talk about the ordinance introduction for the Fire Hazard Severity Zone map and municipal code amendment. And as you read, Mayor, the recommendation is that Council introduce ordinance 2025-04, adopting the state recommended Fire Hazard Severity Zone map, and amend Chapter 15.03 of Truckee Municipal Code regarding fire hazard severity zone classifications. So a little background on this, which is very similar to what you heard when the information was first presented to council at the second meeting in February. Fire hazard severity zones aren't new in California. They've been around since the 1980s. It wasn't until the 1990s that those zones were required to be identified in local responsibility areas, which include cities, towns, counties, areas that aren't managed by the state or the federal government. So the scope of the program has increased. Really, it's been driven by deadly and destructive wildfires. And this now what you're looking at is the first substantial update to the local responsibility areas, fire hazard severity zones, since 2007 when they were first published. Became mandated in the mid-90s. It took a while for those recommendations to be made, and ultimately it was done in 2007. And now, in addition to the very high fire severity zones, which were the only zones identified previously, the recommendations now include moderate and high classifications. Just a little background, this process was recently undertaken on state responsibility areas. It was a pretty extensive, I think it was about 2-year process, but they were ultimately updated and adopted in April of 2024. The updates that were done, because it has been so long, are based on improved fire modeling, climate data, very localized climate data, and fire history. So just to go over again the town's requirements regarding these zones, it's first to make the new map recommendation information available for public review and comment within 30 days of receiving the recommendations. We received the map recommendations from the state fire marshal, I believe it was February 10th, and made the introduction on the 24th, so we met that requirement. Now, what we're looking at is the requirement number 2, and that's adopting the updated fire hazard severity zone map by ordinance within 120 days of receiving the recommendations. So this is the introduction, the actual adoption of the ordinance. We're still very much on track of completing that deadline, which would be on June 10th. And then finally, after the ordinance is adopted and the maps are adopted, we need to post the adopted maps and transmit the ordinance map and location to the California Board of Forestry within 30 days of adoption. So a lot of this is quite a bit of information. So we conducted a fair amount of public outreach. A couple visuals there for you. We had a community information night that was available for community members to come and attend. We also made a landing page on our website with an easily accessible link to it. We created a specific email for the public that they can email to the town if they wanted to provide comment, and did some outreach with the Tahoe Truckee Radio 101.5 with some of their community spotlight segments that we work with them on. And we also made some direct outreach to community leaders in the Firewise communities, homeowners associations. We've reached out to the Board of Realtors, the Contractors Association. I'm actually speaking with the Board of Realtors later this week to give a little bit more information on it. And finally, we had some social media that went out as well. So covering the changes, sorry about the formatting there, but the zone changes up on the top of your screen, you can see what the ultimately they were adopted 2008 zone looked like, and that dark red is just the very high fire severity zone. As mentioned, they didn't classify the moderate or the high. Those pink areas above, that's the federal responsibility area. That's not mandated to be identified, so those aren't included. And then down below, those are the updated zones as recommended by the state fire marshal. Pretty large increase, so about a 40% increase in the very high. And then it added on roughly 3,600 acres in high and 79 acres in moderate. And so if you look at that map, there's really, other than the federal responsibility areas that are unmapped because it's not regulated by the state, essentially the entire town has been designated as a classified fire hazard severity zone. So what does that mean? Well, it comes with some state requirements on zone-based regulations. The moderates just need to be adopted and identified. When you move to high, you're adding on some building code regulations for what's called WUI, Wildland Urban Interface Building Codes, Chapter 7A. The town has required that town-wide since 2008, and you'll see that's what the municipal code update is about, is really cleaning up that language. It also adds on a hazard disclosure for real estate transactions. And then when you move up to very high, you're adding on a defensible space requirement for 100 feet. There's also planning requirements on long-term planning efforts by the town. Also some fire safe regulations with fire codes and environmental considerations too if there's development that has to be looked at when CEQA is initiated. That subdivision review is also areas subdivisions, which is classified by the state under Assembly Bill 2911, identified and defined as 30 units or above that only have one way in, one way out. And so if any subdivision under that category is identified, the state comes in, provides some recommendations on how to improve ingress and egress to those areas. So again, apologies on the formatting change there, but this is a summary of the changes to the municipal code. Essentially what this is, and this was done in coordination with the fire district and the fire marshal, the chief building official here at the town, is really cleaning up the language, essentially continuing the practice of requiring the Wildland Urban Interface Building Code requirements to the entire town of Truckee. Basically, it designates the entire town as a wildland urban interface area. So just to quickly go over where we're at in the process, the initial public outreach has been completed. Of course, that's still ongoing as we continue through this adoption process. We're here at the ordinance reading. In a couple weeks, we'll be on the consent agenda, absent of any significant recommendations on changes to this recommendation for an ordinance adoption. And once it's adopted, we'll transmit the ordinance and map to CAL FIRE and the Board of Forestry, and then it'll come to the implementation of the zone-based regulations. And with that, I'll conclude with the recommendation. Any questions or comments?
Questions? We'll start to my right with Councilmember Romack, Vice Mayor Klostad, Councilmember Henderson, Councilmember Pallavi. Okay. So, James, this is essentially, we don't have much discretion here. When I read the resolution, it says the town must designate by ordinance the severity zones designated by the state.
Yes, and I just realized I missed an important slide on what the town could or could not do with these zone recommendations. So the state fire marshal is required to make these recommendations. The town has the flexibility to increase the severity zones, but we can't decrease them. So once they've been recommended, we can't call a very high a high or a moderate or not classified. We can increase areas to be very high. There's some requirements to that. So if we do categorize any area that wasn't recommended to be very high and we think it should be, we have to provide substantial evidence to justify that classification. Now with moderate zones and high zones, really you have the discretion to do that on your own. Staff isn't recommending changing what the fire marshal's recommendations are, and really that's because this process was done very methodically, scientifically, and we don't really have the evidence to back up changing those zones. We also didn't receive any public input or comments related to a request to increase the zone designations either.
Okay, and looking at the map, it looks like the very high severity zone essentially tracks the conifer forest.
Yes, similar. So a lot of what it does is how do those flames continue into a community from what they call the forest land surrounding a local area. And so a lot of times it could have to do with the conifer forest because the flame lengths that would be associated with a fire in that area would be much higher than maybe grassland. So if I go back to the map a little bit, you can see those areas as still a high fire severity zone, but those more flat areas with more brush-based vegetation, not the heavy timber, near Jorger Drive and the Butterfield area, flatter terrain, less fuel density, and that's likely why they was categorized in that way.
Okay. And then this map doesn't reflect any wild land mitigation that's occurred.
That's correct. Thanks for pointing that out. So they take a 50-year time horizon without any mitigation effort. So something that kind of seems counterintuitive when you see these maps, a couple areas. One is a golf course, but they consider what if that golf course stopped being maintained and just turn into wildland again. And then also you see Donner Lake there. Donner Lake is categorized mostly as a very high fire severity zone. So they imagine, and they speak to this specifically, as if maybe severe drought periods where the water level goes down, maybe docks, any type of structure that was built on a waterland. And so that's the approach there.
Okay, I have only two more questions.
Go ahead.
And the local fire district, it has prepared a wildfire risk map that's different from this one.
That's correct. So the Community Wildfire Protection Plan that the fire district led, also Nevada County recently adopted one as well, which the Truckee Fire District's plan was turned into an annex of that. They take more of a risk approach of analyzing wildfire threats. And so the difference between a hazard map, which is the fire hazard severity zones, is really mitigation efforts. So I think the best example that I like to bring up is flood maps, right? So if you live within a flood zone and you're right next to the normal water flow of that, say the Truckee River, you're at threat and you're at high hazard, high risk of a flood. Now, if you build that house up on stilts and bring it above elevation of those flood levels, really that risk is gone. The hazard of flood is still there where your property lies, but the risk to your property damage essentially goes away. And so the Community Wildfire Protection Plan takes a risk approach and really tries to prioritize what are the areas that are most at risk and what are the best ways to reduce the risk to the community. Because like flooding, like seismic activity with earthquakes, the hazard for wildfire will likely never go away, but what can we do to reduce the risk with that hazard?
Okay. So my last question is, if I'm in a neighborhood that has mitigated the wildfire risk by actively engaged in defensible space, the map I take to my insurance carrier is the one I got from the local fire district.
I would say so. And you bring up a good point too. So the California Insurance Commissioner has said that he doesn't anticipate this map to influence property insurance decision making because underwriters take a risk approach when evaluating providing insurance, and so that's the stance they're taking. But it is a good point that insurance is a risk-based analysis more commonly than a hazard-based analysis.
Thank you very much. And now is the opportunity for any public comment. Does anyone wish to make any public comment on the fire hazard map handed to us by the state? Okay, seeing none, let's go into deliberation. Start down to
James, just want to thank you for this and working on this, and would encourage the public. There's a really robust webpage that you've put together with some great maps and a video from the state. So if anyone has additional questions, to check that out. But I'm comfortable moving forward with this, as I think we kind of have to.
And if you didn't follow any of that video does explain the difference between the two maps and why they're both important pieces of information for our community to understand. One, our current risk level, but then this hazard level is also critical for our understanding, because what that tells us, if we don't continue to actively manage the growth in our region, we will all be in a catastrophic risk zone that will elevate us to that risk level from a hazard. So it's really important. And if you were here for the earlier presentation, we are doing a lot in our town. We're prioritizing wildfire mitigation, and we're trying to really elevate this in the community. It's also a really fun website to go look at. I love the little slider so you can compare the two. Please check it out. It's really great information. Thank you for your work on this.
Yeah, and I want to mention Drew Jack's great work in making that handy tool. And the website is townoftruckee.gov/FHZS. Let me start that over. townoftruckee.gov/FHSZ update. And that'll be it. Thanks.
Okay, turning to my left, any comments or motion on my left?
Yeah, I would just say, it's not the first time we've seen these maps, but every time that I see them, they sort of like hit me in the gut a little bit. Like, oh my gosh, we really have this huge, severity coupled with risk. And I would say the maps are incredible tools. The Community Wildfire Protection Plan, or CWPP, those are the risk maps that we were talking about. So take a look at them, and just as we move into spring, just remember it's really incumbent upon all of us to also manage our individual parcels and private properties, and make sure you're removing any extra vegetation and protecting that critical zone really close, the first few feet from your home. You're doing the home hardening and everything, because these maps sort of say it all without a lot of words.
Councilmember Pahlavi.
Did you have any additional comments, or would you like me to make a motion?
I'd love a motion.
Okay. We are introducing ordinance 2025-04, adopting the new fire hazard severity zones and amending Chapter 1503 of the Truckee Municipal Code.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Passes unanimously. And now we're moving on to item 7.2. Danny Renfro, our police chief, will start us off on behalf of staff. Danny, let us know who else might be making a presentation, or maybe Jen?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Members of the council, Danny Renfro, Truckee Police Chief. So we're here to talk about the Truckee Tahoe Regional Homeless Action Plan. And tonight joining me is Shauna Doherty from Agnew Beck. She's going to be the main presenter on the action plan. We also have District 5 Supervisor Hardy Bullock, who will be speaking to a few slides. And then I also want to recognize our partners with Nevada County, Ryan, Phoebe, and Jasmine for being here. And I apologize if I missed anybody else that's here. So one might ask, why is the police chief presenting on this topic? I'm certainly not fashioning myself as a housing expert, but I am a part of the committee that helped develop this. And it truly does affect police services of how we can serve our community the best way. Oftentimes, when we're dealing with the unhoused, we find ourselves dealing with a situation that's very low level in criminal activity and a quality of life type of situation, to where our police staff basically have their hands tied behind their back without a lot of resources or authority to take action. So in order to address that situation, we need to have some sort of plan. And so this is what we collectively have decided to move forward with your authorization. So I'm just going to go through a couple slides before I kick it over to Shauna, but some of you have seen these slides before. I do want to highlight the work that the town has done in the housing space to date. This is the entire spectrum of the housing need, and really the work that we've done as a town is lease to locals, rooted renters. We've heard some of that before in the budget meeting. Soft financing for affordable housing projects, the ADU programs, Truckee Tahoe Workforce Housing Agency, and then development code changes. So that's the work that we've done so far as a town, and I think that that's important to highlight. What we are focusing on now is that lower 30% AMI piece that we're going to talk about tonight. So homeless solutions that align with town priorities. The housing policy that's in place, which is the housing element, supportive housing is allowed in all communities in California without the approval of local government or county government. That's just the way that the law is written. And so there's not a lot of authority that we have as local government in order to dismiss these types of housing programs. Affordable workforce housing goals that the town has adopted, and then obviously safety is of top priority. Crime prevention, housed people result in fewer police calls for service. So that's data that we have learned through the experts that have done these studies that show that if people have a place to go, that reduces the amount of police service that's required if they don't have a place to go. Fire prevention, it obviously reduces the risk of fires in the forest if people are out camping. And then community character and cohesion. So that's a council priority, with the town vision being welcoming and inclusive, and facilitate a culture of inclusion, and collaborate to provide mental health and homeless services. So with that, I am going to go ahead and turn it over to Shauna Doherty and Supervisor Hardy Bullock. Let me pull up their slideshow here.
Sauntering over, I thought Shauna was first. Mayor Zabriskie and council members, thanks for having me tonight. I'm just here to briefly, I know it's been a long day, I just want to briefly introduce the THAC plan. And first of all, thank you for your community service, but also your contribution to housing. I think homelessness, as the report points out, is a housing based problem that we all face. So thank you for your contributions to that. Thanks to the stakeholders who contributed to THAC. I'll go over that a little bit in a minute. It's essentially a roadmap for the next 5 to 6 years on trying to understand the solutions that are available for us as a regional community, so the town, the stakeholder partners, our community, and those people that are unhoused in our community. There's many more opportunities for outreach, so I just wanted to make the public aware that after the town council has deliberation, makes a decision on the report, the Nevada County Board of Supervisors and also the Placer County Board of Supervisors. We'll have hearings similar to this where you can air your concerns, bring them forward. You can also certainly reach out to myself, my office, or any of the representatives from Nevada County that are here tonight to talk with you, answer your questions. I've met with many of the community members, and I know you have as well, so looking forward to the discussion tonight. Next slide. So where we started, we had 12 regional stakeholders over an 18-month period. We had 5 meetings, and then I think co-chaired with Mayor Zabriskie, myself, Supervisor Gustafson, had additional meetings trying to kind of guide the process along to make sure it was productive. The purpose was to create a data-driven, locally designed, collective approach to solving homelessness in the Truckee Tahoe region. There's a map inside the report. It's critical that you understand the map and kind of the geographic boundaries associated with the problem and how the report intends to solve that. It was administered by HRCS, which is our Homeless Resource Council of the Sierras, funded by TTCF and additional data analysis funding. Agnew Beck, Shauna was running the project. We all know Shauna, and she also had a previous tenure here with the town, so she had a deep understanding of our community needs related to housing and homelessness both. So who are we and what stakeholders were in the room for those discussions? AMI Housing, which is a housing provider that works for Placer County and other counties across the Sierra region. Nevada County, our county library was part of it. NTTHS, the North Tahoe Truckee Homeless Services, Sierra Community House, Truckee Tahoe Community Foundation, Tahoe Forest Health Systems played a critical role in the discussion. Obviously the town of Truckee, which included Chief Renfro, and your town manager, Jen Calloway. Truckee Chamber of Commerce, Volunteers of America was one of the service providers, and then North Lake Tahoe Truckee United for Action. You know, each stakeholder brought our own perspective. Mine was regional collaboration. I brought that with my opinion on how that should be organized, and the report reflects my views. Danny and Jen both had their own individual concerns that were hopefully reflected in the plan with additional discussion tonight by the council. Let's see. I think that's it for me. I just want to make one note that we were in closed session today as a Board of Supervisors looking at properties in West County, and I did have a great conversation with my colleagues, and they've reaffirmed their commitment and the board objective for both funding and staff support to solve the homelessness piece here in Truckee. So I look forward to working on that, have the full support of our board and the county to work with the town council and move this initiative forward. Looking forward to your conversation. With that, Shauna Doherty from Agnew Beck.
Sorry.
All right. Good evening, Town Council, and welcome to everybody who's in the room and also streaming in to watch this. I'm Shauna Doherty, and I'm with Agnew Beck Consulting. We're a consulting firm based in Alaska. 3 of us are based here in Truckee, and we were hired by the Community Foundation about 2 years ago. They got some funding and said, we have been working on homeless services in the region for many, many years. We've had some great strides in serving our community, the vulnerable population. But what keeps happening is we get services going, and then they're not sustainable and they're not permanent. And also, we have various partners from around the region working at different cadences and on different priorities. It is time now to have one roadmap that we all agree is the best way to move forward with addressing this issue as a starting place. And so that's why we're here tonight. This is certainly not the start of starting to talk about homeless services and work on homeless services. We've been doing that for years, but this is the first time that we've had a collective plan that 12 stakeholders have come together and worked on by multiple conversations, feedback from those with lived experience, and bringing in an expert in this field to really look at our data over the last 3 years, and then having lots of conversations around what's the right size for Truckee and Tahoe, what works here, and so that's what we have before you tonight. Hardy went over this, but I'm going to just stress the point of when I get to talking about the goals and the strategies that are in the action plan, they really were based on the data. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the data tonight because we just went through a cycle of a public meeting. And then there was a survey conducted by the town, and I had a chance to look at those. And what's very clear is it's still confusing to understand the data around homelessness. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time on that tonight because it's important to understand what is behind these goals and why we believe they're the important steps forward. So to get right into it, first of all, before I get going, I just want to, if you were on the Tahoe Truckee Homeless Advisory Committee, raise your hand. Thank you. Thank you so much for your service. So all these people were part of feeding us edits, being part of multiple meetings, and crafting this plan before you. And then I'd love to know how many of you have been in this room from the Nevada County meeting and then also came to the Town of Truckee meeting at the Rec Center. Amazing. Thank you for building this process with us. In the back of the room is frequently asked questions that Nevada County has put together fresh off the press based on the feedback from all of you. And so we're moving in the direction of collective education around this topic. So this is the Housing Action Plan. Hopefully, if you want to follow along, I'm going to go very high level tonight. But there's 4 focus areas. And I'm going to talk a little bit about how we got to those. So this is a graphic that it was at the public meeting on April 3rd. I'm going to spend a little time talking about it because this is an example where we looked at housing continuums and homeless services continuums throughout the country. And a lot of communities have these. Again, back to we really wanted to say what works here in our region. We're not going to just take something that works in Oakland or something that works in San Francisco or Colorado and then just adapt it here. We learned from those models, and then we talked, we looked at the data, we talked to our service providers, people that work in the field and do outreach, and said, let's start to frame up what would work in our smaller community. So the action plan really focuses on the 2 left sides, the navigation center and the interim housing, which is a new word. We used to call it like a day center and a warming shelter. And what we learned from the work of the last 2 years is that we really would like to move towards a model called a navigation center, which is open year-round, 7 days a week, and it really is similar to a day center where it offers a place for people to come in, get resources, and eventually work towards housing. And if they can't get into housing, then having some interim beds. The next one we're going to talk about is the permanent supportive housing, and that is housing with services. And then we get into the far right, which is the affordable housing, and some of those we have many of those in our region that we're aware of, but that's also part of the continuum because that's the appropriate housing for some people. And then wrapped around all of that in the action plan is ensuring that we have funding and resources available for rental assistance, rapid rehousing, outreach, and ongoing prevention. So this just gives you an idea of what's in the plan, because I'm going to go through that quite quickly. A little bit on the highlight that's a big attachment in the action plan is the study that we had done by BBS. And like I said, this is the first time that we've had an analysis of data specific to the Tahoe Truckee region. This consultant looked at 3 years of data of who's coming into our system, what services are they using, what services are they using to get out of the system, and then truth checking that with the service providers based on what they're seeing and what they think the gaps are. This is a little hard to see, but I wanted to take some time because we did get a lot of questions about who is this plan serving, who are the homeless people in our community, and what are their needs. So 78 is a number that, for those of you who have read the plan and come to the meetings, we talk about a lot. And that is the people that are remaining unserved because we do not have the services here. They're a higher vulnerability population. And as Chief Renfro talked about, we don't currently have services at the level that we need for this particular population. So our data showed that we had 100, on average, when you take 3 years of data, on average 117 households served per year. 30 of those households came through services at Sierra Community House because of domestic violence services and needs, and 87 came through either the day center or the warming shelter. Of those 117, 89% of those were individuals, so not families. So that data, we got further analysis, and we said, okay, if what happened to those 117 households? On average per year, 27 were able to get services, like I said, through Sierra Community House. 6 were able to secure homes with rapid rehousing funding, and 6 were able to secure funding with case management, which left 78 unable to get services and in a situation of chronic homelessness. So part of what we do when we're looking at the data of unhoused population is a vulnerability score, and that's in the action plan as well. And really what we've learned is that of the 78 households, about half are very high vulnerability, which is the right side of this table right here, and approximately about the other half fall in the medium vulnerability. And I don't want to spend, you guys have had a long day, but the point of this whole conversation around the data is that it does inform the type of services that we're putting forward in the action plan. It gives you the why behind the 4 focus areas. So back out to the actual action plan. That's just a little bit of the roots behind the goals that you'll see in the plan. Many of the people who raised their hand that were on bringing the diverse perspectives to the table, the chamber and the hospital, and not the regular cast of characters that are coming in and being part of the conversation, really helped we wanted to create a lens for how we were, not only the data, but what is unique to our community to address this issue. What do we believe? And so collectively in this plan, what we wanted to put forward is that we really believe this is a collaborative issue that requires a collaborative response. It's no one organization's challenge or problem to solve. It's really going to take a range of cast of characters, like we address a lot of the issues here. Compassion, remembering these are human beings, and compassion is central, and making sure that all the services that we think about put the human first, that housing is really the path to solving homelessness. That's critical, and that doing nothing is going to cause significant both economic and safety impacts. The goals are ambitious. One thing about being in a small area with a small number compared to the urban areas is we can set goals about ending homelessness. The focus is on the vulnerable populations and working collaboratively. Back to the framework. Again, just reminding you of this, and I'm going to talk about each of these areas, and then we're going to talk about the feedback that we got at the April 3rd workshop in relation to these areas. April 3rd, it was great to be out in the community having a conversation about this plan. Hundreds of ideas. I really enjoyed being able to have a chance to have conversations at one station. So we had about 60 people attend. Approximately 12 community members did their own group in Spanish. And then we did a summary that's part of the staff report. So focus area 1 in the action plan is about crisis response. And this is where being able to respond directly to those who are homeless, having a navigation center and beds, is what's being proposed. So the star is going to indicate which part of the action plan fits in with this framework. Goal 1 is the expanding housing navigation services. So we have, thanks to the North Tahoe Homeless Services and Kathy Foley's team, we do have some level of navigation services, meaning they are taking a van, they're working with the Nevada County Joseph Center to, as staffing and budget allows, part-time connecting with our unhoused population with services and meals and connecting them to transportation or what they need. So that's why we chose the word expanded, because we're not going from zero. We would just like to have some kind of permanent, year-round, 7 days a week, not just weather-triggered. Goal 2 is to make sure that if we're lucky enough to set up some kind of navigation center with beds, making sure that we have the funding in place. We have some funding, but not nearly enough to be able to serve people to get into housing when they are stable. So rapid rehousing is rental assistance and transportation money and whatever it is to move forward with their lives. So that's also part of the plan. Feedback that we got on this station related to the navigation center and beds. One of the questions we asked at each of the stations is, do you understand this model that we're trying to put forward? Because that tells us how much work we need to do to build education. This kind of plan is new to our region. Talking about it, the vocabulary is new. And so we just wanted to see, before we ask you what your feedback is, do you understand the navigation center model with the beds and moving towards that? There are varying levels of familiarity with it and a request to continue to do outreach. In general, the feedback was strong support for moving from a weather triggered, where the weather triggered is just when it's really freezing cold and stormy. People have a place to sleep and then they go out in the day and they're on their own. And if it's not that freezing cold, then they're still on their own. And so moving towards a more of a year round. We asked feedback about your criteria for a place like this. There was talk about individual, has mostly to do with the sleeping areas, but making sure that there's dignity when thinking about the design, individual spaces, spaces where people could get mail. Many people are looking for work, so making sure there's washing machines and places like that to set them up for success. Next area is stable housing, and this is where we had conversations about permanent supportive housing. That is a term that probably a year, 2 years ago, many would not know what that term means, and it seems like we all are gaining understanding of what that means, which is housing with services for those that require that kind of level of support. So vulnerable and high vulnerability populations. Based on the data, the report came out that we need about 44 units of permanent supportive housing in our region to serve this population. I'm just going to this was not in the plan, but I thought we had so many questions about where did this number come from. So Brown Bear Studios is open and occupied in Kings Beach. That's 14 units. Pacific Crest Commons is coming online 25-26. That will be 10 units. So we have, or in the pipeline, we'll have 24. As far as how do we address the gap of the 20, what I put there is it truly will be an ongoing evaluation, project by project, unit by unit, to see what are the needs still pointing to, what is the financial feasibility, what's the data telling us, and so that is an ongoing conversation that is not solidified in the plan. So making sure that when people get into housing, that we are also including an important action and strategy to work with Nevada County and AMI Housing to make sure that we have the funding and the services in place to support those and be successful in the housing. Feedback that we got around permanent supportive housing, again, general understanding of permanent supportive housing, but many, many, many questions about operations and management. So people kind of understand the concept, but we need a lot more information out there around that, and we learned that a lot from Hope Ridge House. Again, it's new to our area. It's not surprising. So there seemed to be overwhelming support for the model, but only if there was a high level of services and funding in place to provide those services. And so recognition that those two need to go hand in hand. Mixed support and a lot of sensitivity around permanent supportive housing in residential zones. Not 100%, but definitely a lot of conversation and opinions around location. So when we ask the question, what are what's feedback for criteria for future permanent supportive housing? Walkability, close to surfaces, transportation, not isolated, and making sure that as you plan for the future, making sure there's a lot of education and outreach. And then constantly in the conversations is, it is tough to live here. Housing is expensive. I'm not unsympathetic to the need to invest in housing for the unhoused, but remember, there's a lot of other people who are also struggling and to get by. So what else is happening? And that just tells us that we need to make sure that as we're talking about this topic, that we're framing it within all of the work that's happening across income levels. Partnership, I'm not going to talk much here, just the importance of it. Continuing the work of the Tahoe Truckee Homeless Advisory Committee, and then as we move forward, formalizing MOUs to clarify roles around very specific projects. So not just the partnership, but partnership when at the level of a project. We will, as we move forward, it's really important, and we heard that in the community outreach and the survey, just to continue the process of education and consistent, regular outreach. Feedback that this is regional education and making sure that we have one central location for all of the information. Sometimes it's coming from Truckee, sometimes it's from Nevada County moving forward. We want to have a central hub for this information. Last one is around funding. All of the areas of the action plan require funding. Some of the funding will come from public sources, state, and some of it, especially in the expensive place that we live, will need to come from local, and especially if we want to implement creative solutions and quick solutions. So we've put a plan, some strategies around raising local dollars for some of the implementation of this plan. So the feedback we got about funding was basically we have a long ways to go before people to build understanding. And so as you're thinking about fundraising, continue to build education and trust. So people understand the issue, they understand the solutions, they understand who's doing what and roles to go hand in hand with any kind of fundraising. So what's next? Tonight, we're before you. You're the first elected body to be considering approval of this plan. The Homeless Resource Council of the Sierra is a nonprofit that coordinates homeless services between Nevada and Placer County. Their board approved it, I think, in January, but this is the first elected. And then it's going to Nevada County and other partners for adoption as well. And then the hope is that we relaunch the Tahoe Truckee Homeless Advisory Committee, and we begin forming work groups and starting to work and study and feasibility on all of these actions. So with that, I do have a team here of service providers who, if there are questions related to service provision, they're here to support me in that. But thank you for your time, and we look forward to moving forward with this work.
Thank you, Shauna. So next, what we're going to do is
let me go ahead and interrupt. Let's try to cut out the applause now. No applause, no boos, Just listen respectfully to what people have to say. And when you get out in the hallway, you can start applauding out there all the way down the stairs out on the street, or complaining all the way out. But while you're here, just civilly listen to other people. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. After the workshop on the 3rd, the town launched an online survey to ask these similar questions for folks that didn't have the opportunity to go to the workshop. And so I'm going to summarize the feedback that we received. Just note that all the responses have been included in public comment, and so this is just the themes and a summary of the feedback that we received. So the awareness and understanding of the Homeless Action Plan, about half of the respondents have not heard of the Truckee Tahoe Regional Homeless Action Plan, and nearly 2/3 haven't read it. Most respondents, 64%, were unfamiliar with the concept of rapid rehousing, and respondents requested more transparency in the data collection, such as point-in-time counts, local homelessness trends, and the clarity on whether individuals are Truckee residents or from other areas. Key features and locations for a navigation center. The feedback that the respondents wanted was emphasize the importance of walkable access to transportation, mental health and addiction services, hygiene facilities, case management, job training for the navigation centers. Ideal locations should be close to support services, but not within residential areas, schools, or parks. A central yet discrete location was preferred. Pet accommodations, access to basic needs, and individualized plans were frequently mentioned as critical components. So community involvement in making the project successful. To make the projects like Pacific Crest Commons successful, the community suggested ensuring services are available on site, prioritizing locals for housing, and having a clear behavior expectations for residents. Respondents recommend including the community early through outreach, flyers, social media, and town halls to build trust and reduce opposition. Community workshops, online surveys, and advisory groups were the most favored ways to gather local input on homelessness solutions. So priorities, concerns moving forward. The top priorities for homelessness funding were outreach and case management. Rapid rehousing and permanent supportive housing were a tie. As far as percentages, the most valued support services were mental health care, employment assistance, substance use treatment, and case management. Residents voiced strong concerns about safety, fire hazard, attracting unhoused individuals from other areas, and the impact of homelessness on property values and tourism. And many emphasized the need for realistic, compassionate, and community-specific solutions that balance support with accountability. So this is the feedback that we received from the action plan, from public comment from today's that we received today. 13 were supportive, strongly endorsed the plan. 3 was basically a conditional supportive of the plan, but overall opposed to scattered site supportive housing element, called for more detail in planning, oversight, and community input. 7 opposed, expressed strong concerns about neighborhood impacts, lack of transparency, inadequate support services, and fiscal responsibility. And a key takeaway is community feedback reflects broad support for the plan with specific concerns around implementation, especially related to housing location and supportive services. Further public comments, community support and compassion. Multiple residents voiced concern or voiced strong support of the action plan. They emphasized that the moral and humanitarian importance in addressing homelessness, especially in light of the extreme weather and rising housing insecurity. Supporters believe the plan is well developed, grounded in community collaboration, and aligned with the town's values of inclusivity, safety, and compassion. Several highlights of significance of ongoing partnerships and urged funding and implementation efforts to continue. So some of the themes were the homelessness is a life-threatening issue that impacts community well-being. The plan reflects best practices and has broad support from nonprofits, faith-based coalitions, and longtime residents. Housing first strategies and coordinated efforts were praised as essential next steps. So more concerns about the scattered site supportive housing. Several community members opposed placing permanent supportive housing in residential neighborhoods. Common objections included concerns about safety, lack of oversight, potential decrease in property values, and absence of behavioral requirements, sobriety or treatment compliance. Themes of distrust and frustration. Residents expressed frustration about perceived lack of transparency and community engagement. Some viewed the plan as fiscally irresponsible and criticized the use of Home Key Plus funding without community input. Others requested alternative solutions such as centralized rehabilitation facilities and transitional housing models in non-residential areas. And then some constructive alternatives proposed. A community member outlined a tiered system, basic support facility, earned privilege housing, reintegration centers with structured rules, oversight, and gradual transition. A call for more detailed planning, community inclusion, and safeguards to ensure public trust and long-term success. So that's just kind of a highlight of the feedback that we received. And with that, we are able to take questions.
And I'll just weigh in the 23, I think, public comments that Danny summarized. That was of this afternoon, so I think a few more have come in since we were even in our budget workshop, so we may be missing a few, but wanted to give some context to the comments received. And then the community survey results in particular, well, they're posted in the public comment forum and everybody can read through those, all of the comments. They're pretty wide ranging, so we did our best to kind of narrow down. Danny did a great job trying to narrow in on the themes. I think they are generally aligned with what we heard from the community feedback at the engagement event in early April, just in terms of education and understanding and community conversation around many of these topics that are fairly new for a lot of us. So I just wanted to make it clear we weren't trying to capture all of the comments in this presentation, but tried to capture the major themes. These aren't statistically valid, of course, but they're giving you the general sense of what we've gathered in the feedback we've heard.
Thank you. What we're going to do now is allow each of the council members to ask questions of the staff and the presenters. And then once we've exhausted our questions, it'll be an opportunity for public comment, and people will have 3 minutes each to make a public comment. And their comments should be directed to the council. And then after we receive the public comments, the council will go through another round of questionings to the extent we want to, doing follow-up on any of the comments from the public. And then after that, the council will go into deliberation. So now it's time for the initial round of council questions. I'll start this time at my left with Councilmember Pallavi.
Great. Thanks for the presentation, and thanks for everybody who's both contributed to the report, served on the committee, and obviously members of the public for being here as well and engaging so far. I think I only have one question. I've read the report, been so many conversations about it lately. But to clarify, and then I also wanted to point out Supervisor Bullock on the Health and Human Services page of the Nevada County website. I believe you guys posted answers to like 60 plus questions on there. Is that correct? And just in case anybody didn't see that, nevadacountyca.gov, and there's a huge amount of questions on there as well. But so on like the supportive housing, there's going to be some supportive housing at Coldstream, at Pacific Crest Commons. That is good to go. If an entity that wasn't the town or county, whether it's a private type of corporation or a nonprofit, wanted to buy a house and provide homeless services, is that happening in other parts of the state? And B, or is it all sort of like local government focused in terms of like who's supporting, who's providing supportive housing? And then the second part of that question is, based on that zoning, or based on that, if that, regardless of that, if that is happening, is that something like a nonprofit can come in and buy a single family house. Phoebe Bell is here. It looks like is going to take the reins on answering my questions.
I think for part one, we'll ask the county to respond. For
Okay.
part two, it is part of new
if you could
state
just stay over
law.
there.
Yeah, it is part of state law that is an allowed by right use, and what that means is a nonprofit, a private landowner or property owner could come in, purchase a home in any single family resident zoned area, and operate it as a permanent supportive housing. The town may not even know it's happening. They don't have to come to the town and ask permission, get a use permit, or anything of that nature.
And could an existing property owner, without even a change of ownership, also do the same thing? They instead of short-term renting, they could just lease out with AMI Housing or whoever, right? Like they can also choose to do that on their own. State law allows that. Yeah.
And I think.
And you should introduce yourself. Phoebe.
Sorry, Phoebe Bell. I'm the Behavioral Health Director for Nevada County.
Thank you.
The roots of homeless services are not really in government, and that's been one of the challenges of the last 5-10 years where that transition has happened. The roots are in largely faith-based communities, nonprofit providers, meeting a humanitarian need of people struggling without housing and all the related challenges that they may be facing and providing those services. So traditionally, those services have been provided in all kinds of settings that weren't governmental and weren't funded by government particularly. And the degree of government involvement in homeless services has grown dramatically as the crisis has grown dramatically, as the housing shortage has grown dramatically. And with government comes more money, but also more rules and how you can do business. And so some solutions aren't a good fit for government. We don't have funding or services that are allowed to operate in the ways that that particular program might want to operate. And when we use government money, there's expectations around how things operate, for example, and rules and regulations about how we can do it. So absolutely, all over the country, there's homeless services happening without public dollars, purely either at an individual or small organizational level, or even larger faith-based levels like Salvation Armies and those kinds of things.
Yeah. Thanks, Phoebe.
If this helps, my understanding, essentially a person can be a landlord for people off the street, and the only thing is they're not going to make as much money.
Right.
As someone renting to wealthier people.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. And I guess sort of when we look at this problem, we see it exacerbating in California. We've seen it exacerbating due to so many of the housing affordability issues that our community and so many other communities experience. Are we seeing the sort of same heavy-handed, I would say, state government approach, both from sort of a by right perspective? So in the same way where the state is usurping so much local control on housing and zoning and things like that, are we seeing a trend on this issue as well, just anecdotally?
I think yes. I mean, there have been continuing legislative efforts to require that certain uses be allowed without any kind of discretion at the local level. And shelters are one. Other kinds of supportive housing are another type of thing that state law now says that you just have to allow. You don't have any discretion about it. Any place that residential uses are allowed, some of these other uses have to be allowed too.
It's also support services too, which if you extend it out a little bit, includes things like thrift stores, you wouldn't necessarily include in that same category, but they're doing the same thing where they're saying, wherever you allow standard retail, you have to allow a thrift store now.
Interesting. I think that's all my questions for right now. Thank you. This is a really tough subject it's for all of us, so just want to also acknowledge that. Thank you.
Yeah. Councilmember Henderson.
Thank you. Just a couple of questions. So this is a roadmap for the next several years, right? Next 5 years or so. And because it's a roadmap and because the plan isn't actually currently resourced, it also doesn't mean every strategy in the plan will necessarily be implemented or not, right? It's going to very much depend on funding that's available, whether that's public sector, grants, private sector, et cetera.
That's
and sort
correct.
of seizing those funding opportunities.
Correct.
Okay. And so the funding opportunities are really going to drive what strategies we can actually implement in the plan in a lot of ways.
Yes.
Okay.
I would say funding and capacity from a staffing perspective or a community resource perspective with our partners. There's a multiple number of layers on there, similar to our decarb roadmap and our other roadmaps that we adopt.
Okay. And because the plan also doesn't specify roles, which I know you were talking about, the roles will also be very project dependent and project specific when we get to implementation around any of the strategies in the roadmap.
Yeah, I'll ask Sean or anybody to correct me, but in terms of as we get into each action item, for example, the staff recommendation that's on the screen ahead of you is to focus on navigation center services at the moment. And as we delve into what that looks like, we'd be figuring out who has capacity from either a staffing perspective, funding perspective, support perspective.
Right. And I think last question, as we move into implementation and if the focus initially is on a navigation center, is there the intention amongst all of the partners who have put this together that for any element that moves toward implementation that there is continued robust community outreach and engagement? I think that that's something that's really, really critical. And so I don't see this as, okay, we do outreach around the roadmap and then we're kind of moving on into implementation. It's outreach as part of the implementation as well.
I think that's the maybe number one common theme throughout all of the engagement that we've heard is just the desire to have more information about what these different options are, what they mean, how they would impact the community. And so part of our recommendation is community engagement and outreach, and that is meant to be more expansive than just around navigation center services. And I see Supervisor Bullock moving over to the microphone. So
thank you, sir.
Yeah, thanks for the question. That was a good point of mine. I think going into this process, we kind of envisioned, or at least part of what I advocated for is really clearly understanding the roles, because local government, oftentimes there's a natural tension between county and cities, towns, state, federal, understanding where the jurisdictional kind of best practice is for solving a problem, but also who's responsible ultimately for it. So many people within our homeless population have co-occurring pieces that are served by county service provision, right? So it could be mental health, behavioral health, substance use disorder treatment, food insecurity, legal assistance, whatever it may be. What we're talking about while the adoption of the plan is kind of in its infancy stage here with all the different jurisdictions is, can we get an MOU where we would more clearly define the roles of each jurisdiction so that while we went into, call it THAC 2.0, and we refined some of the things and understood the resources and the capacity and the roles, then we could be in a better position to actually act on those elements. So in your staff and our staff and myself and Mayor Zabisky have all talked about an MOU. The League of Cities and the California State Association of Counties are kind of discussing this very principle tomorrow in Sacramento. So we're hoping to get more insight from other cities around the state and other counties around the state and what MOU may work to define those roles. Also in the back of THAC, there's a little sample from San Diego County on the MOU that they put together trying to define those responsibilities.
Yeah, I think that'll be really important. And this isn't, well, it's sort of a question to anyone who wants to make public comment, but I would love to hear about your expectation for public outreach and what you want as we move into implementation on some of these things. It's really important.
Councilmember Romek.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone who helped put together the plan and who's here tonight. A few questions. Supervisor Bullock, maybe I'll ask you because you spoke to the slide that had all the logos of the participants. I noticed Supervisor Gustafson with Placer County was a co-chair, but Placer County wasn't one of the logos. Did they participate in this action plan?
That's a great question. Go ahead, Shauna.
Yeah.
Oh, no problem. I just wanted to confirm.
And you want them to fix it, right?
And put it on there. No. And then Supervisor Bullock, while you're there, you kind of mentioned right at the beginning of your comments that at the Board of Supervisors meeting today, your fellow supervisors reaffirmed, investing in resources in the Truckee community. Is that also, I think some of the comments we've heard from the community is we don't have enough services here. So is it kind of affirming that you're open to providing additional services or looking at what might be needed in this community?
Yeah, the data that Jen Calloway pointed out clearly establishes the need for support structure, right? And so that could be all the service provision that I talked about a minute ago. It could be the physical infrastructure, showers, place to feed people, place to get those orientation services. Yes, we are standing ready to provide those services. I think to some degree, we have a very flexible and limited population at times requiring those services. So, for example, Crisis Stabilization Unit is located in West County. We don't have a population that would demand that type of service. We do have stabilization teams, crisis management teams that come out to certain locations. So there is some practicality in meeting the needs of a smaller population. I think, yes, we stand ready to provide the services, and we stand ready to fund and staff and help bring about, a inclusive solution. We're limited by funding just like everybody else. We had a $3 million shortfall in our budget that we had to close. That's why the Hope Ridge House was a grant opportunity that I hope to capitalize on. We understand that wasn't possible for us. We stand here with our hand up, understanding that there's more community outreach and definitely a more robust process. We're willing to go through that process to get to the end state where we find something to help people.
Great. Thank you very much. Over to town staff and chief, question for you. You kind of mentioned in your opening comments, I think you said, police are sometimes hands tied when dealing with some of the issues with unhoused folks. Can you speak a little to when we don't have resources, when there aren't beds? Yeah, what does that mean? What can the police do when they get calls from folks asking about people being in front of their business or something like that?
Yeah, and that's pretty much the challenge that we face every day is, what level of criminality are we dealing with? Is it, we're not going to arrest our way out of homelessness, right? And that's not what we're after. But really trying to move what we find ourselves doing is we're moving the problems around town, right? Because when we have low-level offenses that maybe someone wants to trespass an individual off of their private property, well, then we can come and then move them along. And then they just go to another location, and then we wait until we get the call. And then go through that same process again. And we're moving folks around town, and because they don't have anywhere to go. And so that's ultimately what we find ourselves in. And that, like I said, that affects the police service, to the rest of our community, because we're dealing with those types of low-level situations.
Thank you. And then I guess to staff as well, we're being asked to approve a budget appropriation of $25,000. I heard Nevada County is, putting in resources. Is it our understanding that other partners would be allocating funding to the next phase that you're aware of, Jen, or?
I'm not aware of who else is. I'm sure that others were asked, but maybe the county, I don't know if county or Shauna would have any more information on that.
Yes, thank you. Ryan Groover, Health and Human Services Director for Nevada County. So the county is also planning to match that dollar amount to help move the TTHAC plan forward. We have other funding partners who have participated in the past as well, including Placer County. Tahoe Forest Hospital is a key stakeholder who's funded a lot of programs. So we would look to that partnership slide that you saw earlier to maximize funding available by seeking that from other partners.
Great, thank you. Those are all my questions right now.
Vice Mayor Klostad.
Okay, I just have a couple maybe for Shauna since you presented the data. First of all, great report. It's very elegant, great definition of terms, coalescing a lot of critical data. So thank you for your work on that. And it covers a lot of different topics. I just want to focus on the permanent supportive housing beds. So the report says this area, and I just want to clarify, that is North Tahoe region and Truckee, right? Not just Truckee, needs 44 permanent supportive housing beds. Okay. I read through all the public suggestions from the survey, and there were a lot of varying suggestions, but there was a common theme. A lot of them were, this person's suggestion was move them, Reno, Sacramento, Grass Valley. But I'm assuming each of those areas has their own permanent supportive housing needs number, right? So we would just be adding to that. And so there's 14 in North Tahoe currently open, 10 that we're expecting at Pacific Crest opening soon, so we're down to 20. And at this point, we don't have a plan for those 20.
Shauna, could maybe we go to the microphone, so that the people from home can hear microphone.
We should all have a megaphone. You've just confirmed all of those questions I had.
So I'm going to just respond because Anna and I I was shaking my head. So yes, that is the data from the plan that we came up with from looking at 3 years of HIMS data, yes. But it's one thing that's important to remember in looking at the data is that it is literally changing every single day, right? People are coming here, they self-resolve, they find housing, they live with a family member. So that is a number that helped us with our planning process and gave us an anchor, and it was grounded in really good data and really good conversations. Doesn't mean that we're going to go out tomorrow and try to find those 20 gap units, no, but it gives us data to start the conversation around planning. Like, Pacific Crest Commons is approved, it's coming in, we want it to be successful, and what's next? Like, what are we thinking about next, and keep checking the data annually, keep evaluating that number, and keep looking at what's best for our community. I wanted to just comment quickly about another conversation that I have a lot is the people that when we're looking at serving an unhoused population and thinking about how our community does that, we have to remember that people from our community are also in other communities getting services, right? So there have been a lot of conversations around who are the people, they're from out of town, why is it our responsibility to serve this population? And we've shared some data that many, and especially from the data that from North Tahoe Homeless Services that tracks annually, and we talked about this, that a significant amount of people accessing services through the day center and through the past with our warming center have lived in the area for more than 5 years. But also people from our community are being served from in other communities. And so we all just have a responsibility to sort of step up and serve the people that are showing up in our services.
Thank you for that additional point. I appreciate that. And with my questioning on the numbers, I was really trying to just get to the magnitude of that. We've probably solved about 50% of this one very specific issue in this big, broad plan. So much work to do, right? I mean, that's kind of the bottom line. Those are all my questions.
Thank you. Sean, I have some questions for you. Starting with the first of the focus areas, which is crisis stabilization, and it talks about the navigation center, and if I understand, the navigation center would encompass a shelter.
The short answer is yes.
Okay. And
but the difference is right now the model we used to have is weather triggered shelter, and we're talking a navigation center. We're talking about what we're proposing, and it will take a lot more feasibility to understand what that looks like. But moving towards a model that is a year-round, 7 days a week with beds.
And there'd be a time limit on how long someone could stay there.
That's all to be determined.
Wasn't there a 6-month limit for shelters?
I think every navigation centers operates really differently, but the one that we took a tour to and down in South Lake, I think maybe you're referring to them, they may have had a limit. Every operation is different, so we would have to determine that ourselves.
Okay, it may have been the funding source then to put a limit on it. What I didn't see in the crisis stabilization, I saw a lot about services, but I didn't see anything about a site committee or actually establishing a physical location. I don't know if we
Great
just
question. We have not determined a site, and that is the work moving forward. First, we wanted a collective agreement on the model and the roadmap, and now the work really happens with the forming a work group, there has been some work around site analysis. We need to do community outreach. We need to look at what is the capacity, what is the funding opportunity, who would be the operator. Bringing in an operator like Volunteers of America who have run navigation centers and came to our workshop on April 3rd to listen would help us in that process because they're experts in running navigation centers and helping us figure out the right size and funding and operations and location.
Okay, so this action plan is flexible enough we could give a priority to having a shelter in place by next winter.
I'm not going to be able to answer that.
Well, does the action plan, would that allow us to put a priority to a warming shelter? Let's
Yes.
say we have limited resources.
Yes.
We can't spend them both on adding supportive housing and an emergency shelter.
Right. I think what you're asking is the action plan flexible enough that if we have an immediate need and a solution that presents, can we move on that even though we're working on some of these longer term solutions and trying to find funding? Yes.
Right. I think you can tell what I consider a priority. Okay. And then there's still a reference in here to it sounds like Hope Ridge. It's like the Hope Ridge plan is still in this action plan, but Hope Ridge has been withdrawn. Do we have any 5 to 6 person supportive housing project on the shelf or in the works?
So I also want to acknowledge Jasmine and Christina, who were instrumental, and Kathy Foley, instrumental in helping draft this. When we were drafting this plan, the opportunity for the home key funding was available to us, and so it made it into this plan. But as far as what's happening with it, to your question, what is the plan with Hope Ridge, and are we still moving forward with identifying 5 to 6 units? I'm going to let Nevada County speak to that, who are pursuing the funding.
Okay. Is Nevada County still pursuing funding for a single family home supportive housing in Truckee?
Ryan Groover again, Health and Human Services Director. No, we are not pursuing a project of that sort. We're pausing for the town to consider this plan and help us establish priorities as well as rules of engagement going forward and how we're going to approach community engagement, things like that. I do want to point out on the funding side and the shelter versus permanent supportive housing, there are certain things the county is funded for that are always going to be our role, like providing mental health services, for instance. Then there are certain things that we have a funding relationship in, don't necessarily have the money to fund everything, but for instance, behavioral health is having, after Proposition 1 passed last March, is having to take some funding that we previously received more in the prevention space and utilize it for housing. And so some of that funding for ongoing housing is going to be a county role. There is no funding that the county receives for shelter. And so as we pursue this, that's one of those things where we need to look at how can we fund these resources as we bring them to the table.
And speaking of funding, what was the grant that went by the wayside? That was about $1 million we lost.
Home key funding was for permanent supportive housing specifically.
And that was about $1 million?
We were planning to apply for $1 million for that particular home. And that's not funding that could have been used for shelter. It could only be used for a permanent supportive housing project. So we don't have the luxury when we get those restrictive grants of where in the plan we want to put it, if that makes sense.
All right. And then, if I understand correctly, correct me if I'm wrong, to be supportive housing under state housing law, that housing has to have support.
Correct, and it's more than just there is support. Like anybody living anywhere can be receiving some kind of supports from the county or other service providers. Permanent supportive housing, the housing is part of that support for that individual. We're working with them to safely maintain that, usually centralizing that. It's distinct from just having housing and also receiving services.
Okay. I want to go back to the action plan. This may be for Shauna now again. there's a provision under the focus area partnership structure, and we have these new items in here called tactics that weren't in the draft that was circulated for review by the committee. And one of them under strategy 1 talks about this, the third bullet down on page 23 of the report. It talks about establishing a more concrete collaborative partnership between the town and the county to address zoning issues. What are the zoning issues? Do you know what that's referring to there? Offhand.
Okay. Okay, I think I'm going to have Hardy answer this question because it's not ringing a bell for me exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks. I think Councilmember Polvey and I described this a little bit, but I think the spirit of what the plan is trying to address is that obviously we have jurisdictional superior control over installing permanent supportive housing. We'd rather not do that. We'd rather do it through a community-based process, and we hope that THAC and THAC 2.0 and an MOU would be the framework for such a thing, and that the town and the county would both agree to come to that table, that collective table first, to understand land use and zoning if it's appropriate, and it fits through the community's desire to have that type of house or permanent supportive thing, installed in their neighborhood. And then if all things fell apart and somebody, as Councilmember Polvey was describing, AMI Housing or somebody out of the goodness of their heart wanted to open up a warming center or a navigation center or permanent supportive housing, that would be obviously something that was available to them by ordinance and by state statute.
Okay. Well, I'm trying to figure out if there's anything in particular that someone had in mind about some zoning change that the town needs to do that just hasn't been brought to our attention yet.
Yeah. What's that? Yeah, just the shelter.
Yeah. So it's coming back to me. So when we were dealing with the warming center closing down and looking for a new location, as we remember, we were limited by the zoning in the town about where we could be in faith-based. Help me out, planners. Faith-based.
Downtown.
No, just faith-based properties.
Yeah, it was just faith-based.
And so what we want to do is, as we're as part of the work group looking at a navigation center, let's make sure that when we start to think about a solution or a facility moving forward, we're working with the town to make sure that the zoning is not a barrier to being able to find a location that is a good fit.
Okay.
So that's what it had to do with the shelter.
Danielle, I understand we allow shelters in both commercial general and commercial service.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. I understand the basic contours of this plan. It's, as you said, it's housing first. The idea being that if we're going to help the homeless, get them back on their feet, make them productive members, they need housing in order to succeed with the treatment or to have a much higher chance of succeeding with the treatment. And that's proven across the country over the last 50 years. And then you talked about right sizing, which means tailoring it to the population and the characteristics of our homeless. Is that correct? You're nodding your head, yes. Okay.
Actually, a nuance is right sizing it to the character of our community. Right sizing it to the physical characteristics of our community, not the population of the humans.
Not the population of the homeless.
Yes. So the entire plan is about serving the population, but we have been working on THAC to take the data and best practices that we're learning from other communities and then right sizing it for the character and the size of our physical community.
Okay. Can someone tell me now about the services that we provide? I heard we don't have enough services. I assume that's various kinds of treatment and assistance for the entire homeless population, but we have it for some subsets, for some fraction of those in need. Is that correct? I'm simplifying to as much as 6 people. We have enough behavioral service people, doctors on call, psychiatrists, social workers, addiction counselors. We can tap all these people, but only for half a dozen people, not for 20.
So there's services that we as a delivery system, a behavioral health delivery system, make accessible to anybody on Medi-Cal. And I think, so this is the first thing. The public behavioral health system serves people on Medi-Cal with significant behavioral health needs. So mild anxiety on Medi-Cal, you get served somewhere else. Private insurance, you get served somewhere else. Public system, we serve people on Medi-Cal with significant needs. Many people experiencing homelessness, but not all, have significant behavioral health needs. Our responsibility is to serve them, no matter how many show up. So we could provide mental health services or substance use treatment services to every person experiencing homelessness in Truckee that qualifies for our services. So it's not a treatment service restriction or constriction. I think the services more broadly, like, do we have beds for everybody? Absolutely not. Do we have, day centers for everybody? Absolutely not. Those aren't like Medi-Cal mandated services that we need to provide to everybody.
It's the physical services that we're lacking.
Where to
A
take
bed.
Yes, exactly.
Okay. Okay, those are all my questions for now. Are there any follow-up questions before we go to public comments? Okay, now we'll have an opportunity for public comment. I would like people who would like to speak to go ahead and line up against the wall. Whoever's at the head of the line can speak first. You'll get 3 minutes each. As I said, please direct your comments and questions to the council.
Hello.
Hi.
My name is Birgitta DePoli, and I'm a 20-year resident. And just to answer Pulavi's question, I used to live in Southern California, and I worked at a teen crisis shelter in Tustin, and it was a private residence. That being said, this private residence had, of course, it being teens, there was a married couple that fully supervised the teens for 24 hours. And the owner who purchased it, she was from I can't remember now which church it was, but anyhow, she privately purchased the house, so it was a nonprofit. But she informed all the neighbors in regards to the purchase of this home and essentially was looking for their support. And that is something I just wanted to let you know that was missing with the Hope Ridge House project. There was no transparency on that. So I think that makes a difference. So whatever you adopt, I would ask for transparency ahead of time. The other thing to consider when you're looking at this is I didn't see anything in the homeless action plan that compared a budget for site-based programs, permanent housing, versus scattered home permanent housing. And so I think that would be something to do, because I would like that decision to be fiscally responsible and how we use our funds, because of course it's not just the purchase of individual single homes. To me, I would think that, then you're looking at all the different property taxes, you're looking at the CAM, you're looking at the defensible space on all these individual houses as well. So I'd like that to be considered in this decision as well. What is fiscally responsible for that? Let's see. And the other thing to consider too is if we're looking at the definition, which is, the most vulnerable of the vulnerable, which is stated in here of what that defines as disability condition, severe mental health, and substance misuse. For the last month, I've had severe back pain. I'm finally out of it. But the idea of having to have shoveled snow, even on the staircase, to me, it would have just put me out. Mentally, I was depressed. It was just really overwhelming. My husband had to do everything for me. And so I'm just looking at this from this perspective that needs to be something, if you're looking at that population, where is the ease of them? To me, I think like a consolidated area like the 10 units where you're not having to do all these tasks, but you can focus on yourself and getting yourself back on track. So I'd like that to consider. And I have a lot more to say, but my time is up. So thank you.
Well, thank you for what you did say.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Good evening, Mayor Zabriskie and the council members. My name is River Coyote, and I am a volunteer with the United for Action Coalition, which has been in existence for about 10 years. And it is a coalition comprised of faith-based organizations, social service organizations, and community activators. And there's probably about 112 members and about 29 different spiritual leaders from the local churches and synagogues that are on board with us. And we really focus on basic needs of our neighbors, and the coalition conducts regular assessments, and we found through key informant surveys and interviews, and all of the churches and social service agencies found that housing and homelessness was the #1 issue affecting local families and the congregations. So United for Action has been instrumental in helping to create the emergency warming center, finding funding and volunteers. As on the slide, a couple of our members, Reverend Claire Novak and Ann Rarick, who are members of are members of the Housing Advisory Committee. So on behalf of all of us and all of our members, we're asking you to please adopt the Tahoe Truckee Regional Homeless Action Plan. We're especially interested in the 44 units of permanent supportive housing for our most highly vulnerable neighbors, and the creation of the full-time weather-independent navigation center with the beds that Shauna outlined earlier, and of course the rapid rehousing funding. And so the coalition and the faith community feel that not only is this plan morally and ethically a best practice for a healthy, sustainable, cohesive, inclusive, welcoming community, but the town of Truckee's support is critical, because this issue is so complex that we're going to have to leverage everybody's time, treasure, and talent to solve this problem. According to the report, as Shauna outlined, doing nothing causes significant economic impact to the town. And I don't know if it was mentioned tonight, but the BSS study said that homelessness is going to increase with year over year, and I think by 13% next year. So that will just compound if we do nothing. And lastly, the regional action plan is in alignment with the Truckee housing element of the general plan that is also in alignment with California state law, asking us to provide housing for a diversity of our residents. So on behalf of the coalition, I want to thank you for all the work you've done. I do remember when the town passed the policy so that they could build all of the affordable housing units must have been 10 years or so at least ago. And thank you for your continued leadership and vision to help us end homelessness. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Coyote.
Good evening. My name is Jessica Penman. I'm the president and CEO of the Truckee Chamber of Commerce. I'm also a member of the THAC committee. This plan is a result of over 18 months of thoughtful collaboration among dozens of community partners, public agencies, and individuals with lived experience, and represents a tremendous step forward in how our region can approach one of its most complex challenges. We recognize that this document is not a mandate. It does not commit the town of Truckee or a single partner to a specific responsibility or funding obligation. Rather, it offers us a shared North Star to guide regional coordination, align available resources, and support locally tailored solutions to homelessness. In a community with limited capacity and overlapping jurisdictional boundaries, this kind of coordination planning is critical. The Truckee Chamber is especially encouraged by the plan's emphasis on compassionate, data-driven, and actionable strategies, from expanded navigational services and shelter beds to permanent supportive housing and community education. Each focus area aligns with our vision of a resilient and inclusive community, one in which all residents and business owners can thrive together. We understand that some community members have questions or concerns about scattered site supportive housing. It's helpful to know, as has been mentioned tonight, that this model is supported by California state law and has been shown to be an effective approach in similar communities, including, Western Nevada County. We believe that we can find a way to make this type of solution work to reduce homelessness with dignity and care while listening and respecting all of our Truckee neighbors. We also want to emphasize that homelessness, when left unaddressed, carries real economic consequences for our region. Whether it's strained emergency services, impacts on workforce availability, or business environments, the costs are tangible and something we hear often. Implementing even incremental steps from this plan will yield positive returns for both the well-being of individuals and the broader community. Finally, the Chamber would like to offer our continued partnership and participation in the Tahoe Truckee Homeless Advisory Committee. If the town chooses to move forward with exploring the recommendations in this plan, we're ready to assist in connecting with the business community, hosting informational forums, and supporting constructive dialogues that keeps the public informed and engaged. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Beman.
Good evening, Mayor and Council members. Tonight, I urge you to not approve the Tahoe Truckee Homeless Action Plan in its current format. While it's clear that permanent supportive housing is greatly needed in our community, the scattered site housing approach unfairly burdens our working class neighborhoods, removing houses from our locally affordable pool. The Home Key grant required that permanent supportive housing be located within a half mile of community services or provide transportation. Why are we trying to house our homeless so far from basic services? We're not a town with a robust public transportation system. While TART Connect helps bridge the gap, it is still severely lacking. I can recall an occasion last summer when my daughter attempted to get a ride from Glenshire. She had a 4-hour wait time. How can someone effectively plan to get to a job or appointments or even the grocery store from one of our working class neighborhoods utilizing an unreliable service like this? Nevada County has given us a clear example of what not to do. They have not been truthful in their responses, failing to provide clear and consistent information, leading to mistrust, and then publicly shaming or villainizing anyone who has asked questions. They've weaponized the fact that we had questions against us. The county claimed that they did not have time to do any public outreach. However, the agenda from the September 24th Board of Supervisors meeting shows property negotiations with the homeowner at the proposed Hope Ridge house. Records also show that the county facilitated a 12-month master lease between the homeowner and AMI Housing that was signed in November. Surely at some point during the 4-month period between September and January, the county could have started at least some outreach. Supervisor Bullock has claimed that the county was required to have site control of the house in order to apply for the Home Key Plus grant. However, Director Ryan Groover told the Board of Supervisors at the February 11th meeting that site control was not required for this round of funding. While the goal of attempting to end homelessness in Truckee is admirable, how will we stop transient populations with no real desire to live in communal housing from coming here? Since violent felons, sexual predators, and arsonists aren't candidates for projects like Hope Ridge House, where will we house them? I believe more dialogue with our local community is needed. And then just a couple more things that have come up during the course of this meeting. Supervisor Bullock was just quoted in Moonshine Inc. as being committed to finding a Hope Ridge home, despite the county saying that they're not interested in pursuing this type of project anymore. And then they also still submitted that $1 million they were planning to apply to Hope Ridge House as part of their Home Key grant fund. So I'd like to know where that money is going to end up. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms.
Good evening, Mayor and Council members. My name is Allison Bermond. You've all heard from me before, and I don't want to speak for too long as I already sent in public comment. I actually really do support a navigation center, and I think that our community can have, look at how much money we raised to build an animal shelter that is in conjunction with the town. We purchase land to preserve it, and fundraising can happen so that we don't necessarily have to rely only on state funding in order to make something like a navigation center that has services on site for the population. Really what I wanted to just come up here and say is that our community had 1 week's notice before a February 6th meeting. We had 1 week's notice before the April 3rd meeting, and then a survey was posted for approximately 1 week. And I don't think that is enough time to get community input. On the other hand, I do want to acknowledge all of the people that participated in working on this plan. And to listening to everybody who was opposed to having the Hope Bridge House go forward. I know that it's a very complicated issue. I wish that I magically could come up with all the answers and solve it all for everyone, but it's just far more complex than that. But I do appreciate that Hardy Bullock and Phoebe and Ryan and Danny and all of you have been willing to listen to what your community members say, but I do think there does need to be a longer period of time of notifying members of the community to be able to give their input. The survey that was circulated for approximately a week that closed on Sunday was a great survey that should have gone to thousands of community members, and I don't know that it did. I only saw a brief posting on Facebook one day. No email blast was sent, and I think that more community input can be received by the town if there's more time to do that, since most of the people who take those surveys are like myself and work full-time. So I thank you for your time and also your consideration.
Thank you, Ms. Bermont.
Good evening, Mayor Zabriskie, Town Council, staff, everybody here who's here today. I appreciate it. My name is Kathy Foley. I've lived here for 33 years. In the last 15, I've worked really closely with many other people to provide basic necessities and care to our unhoused neighbors. I'm currently the director of North Tahoe Truckee Homeless Services, and I am appreciative that everyone in this room is recognizing just that homelessness is a very complex challenge that demands all of us be working together to solve it. And so the step of people coming together through this process and coming up with this plan is a huge step forward for our community. The plan directly aligns with the town's priorities of housing, safety, and inclusion. And in my vision, it most urgently responds to a growing crisis for our unhoused neighbors that are here in Truckee, loss of vital safety net supports. For over a decade, we've had some form of day center, navigation space, offering access to human necessities like a bathroom, shower, place for laundry, warm meal, a safe place to rest and be part of a community. That ended August 16th of last year, leaving a painful void for our neighbors who depend on these types of resources. One neighbor recently shared with me that the day center was where they could shower, charge their phone, consistently talk to their case manager, use a locker so they didn't lose all their stuff and important documents. Since it closed, they've lost all of that and they feel like they're losing hope. Another shares that coming to the day center to get support was never about just the food. It was one of the only places in this community where I felt human. The staff and volunteers treated me like I belonged. Another loss that we've all recognized is the Emergency Warming Center, which began in the winter of 2015 and for years provided life-saving shelter during the coldest winter nights. During COVID, we were able to open more consistently, providing greater stability for those without an indoor place to sleep. Our hope was to be that every night in the winter, instead, to provide people an option of a place to sleep indoors. Instead, this year, there was nothing. One former guest shared that although the schedule of when you were open and not is challenging, on those stormy nights this year, there were times I didn't know if I'd wake up. I'd used to have some place I could go, and those nights I felt like I was just trying to survive. These aren't rare or extreme examples. They represent what it means to be unhoused in a mountain town with no consistent access to necessities, safety during the harsh winter months, or housing options for individuals that need more support. Tonight, I ask you to vote yes on item 7.2 and continue the collaboration of the THAC committee involving the community in all the discussions and develop a community where everyone's able to access resources.
Thank you, Ms. Foley.
Hi, my name is Audrey Kent, and we are residents of the Glenshire community. And I am just asking tonight that you don't approve of this plan tonight. We, as community members, just heard about this maybe 2 weeks ago, and everyone that I have spoken to since then hasn't even heard a whisper of it. They didn't even know what I was talking about. And I looked on the website trying to find the town website, trying to find maybe some small, concise information that maybe I could send in an email or a social media post. And there wasn't really anything available that would give a quick pros and cons, something that would say what this is about. And so I'm just asking that you don't approve of the plan tonight so that we could have more time to, maybe you guys could provide some stuff for us so that we could then share it with the people that we know so that they know. I think something like this takes a whole lot of community support, and the way that everything sounds like it's being presented tonight makes it sound as though this plan is being put in motion if you guys approve the plan. And I'm just asking that you hold back and maybe don't approve it quite yet. So that is my request. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Kent.
Hi, I'm Ben Jarso. Rachel and I are residents of the Armstrong neighborhood. I attended the last minute meeting here on February 7th, roughly a month ago. We listened to many of the same individuals who are here today, talk to us about how they were advocates both for the unhoused as well as advocates for residents of Truckee. In the interceding months, the county has gone on a bit of a press tour. Quote, "We don't feel our community is supportive of this population. They can't be stereotyped, and we can't apply bias to ourselves to people that are different than ourselves. The message is clear. If you oppose this project, it's not in good faith. It's because you're a cruel bigot." And it hurts to hear this. And it's not just because it goes against the commitments that were made to us on February 7th. It's also because many of us are committed to solving this problem, but just in a different way. I think, I want to echo a lot of the things we've heard tonight about lack of community engagement and notification. And quite frankly, talking to 60 people is insufficient. It's not enough. We were all aligned on the need for something like a navigation center, but phase 2 of the permanent supportive shelter warrants further investigation and more engagement with the community. This is a housing first initiative, which is a pretty unique way of approaching homelessness. Among its key principles is that we try to give immediate access to permanent supportive housing. We call it rapid rehousing. But all the supports and needs are voluntary. There is no requirement or mandatory sobriety. There is no other preconditions. By contrast, most traditional models often require individuals to progress through a series of programs or mandate treatment before they're offered permanent supportive housing. And there are trade-offs to both these models, but quite frankly, not trying to solve sobriety and mental health issues. We're solving symptoms. We're not solving underlying culprits that brought the conditions about to begin with. And we don't have the infrastructure, we don't have the doctors, we don't have the clinicians, we don't have the transportation, we don't have the institutions to adequately support the needs of the permanent supporting housing recipients. Without treatment, addiction relapse rates are in excess of 85%. Even with treatment, they only reduce down to 55%. The program as it's currently designed is setting up unhoused people for failure, and it's indifferent about the communities it hurts along the way.
Thank you, Mr. Jorgensen.
Hi. Hello, Council. My name is Ben Branzel. I live in Coachland. It's a delight to see you guys again, and thanks to everyone who's here. Okay, so just some quick thoughts as a local resident and voter. First of all, I think this thing is fantastic. My bottom line is very much encouraging you to support it and move it forward. A few key reasons. One, I think that the question of how a community treats and serves and supports its most vulnerable members is probably the most morally significant question that any community can face and ought to be judged by. On a personal note, a few weeks ago, I was approached by a man outside of Save Mart who wanted a ride to where he was staying. It was an incredibly cold night. This was earlier in the season. I couldn't believe, how painfully cold it was outside. I took some time to take him where he needed to go. He had a lot of difficulties where he was going. I went back and I talked to my nephews about it the next day, told them about it, and they said, well, what is a person supposed to do in Truckee when it's so bitterly cold and they have nowhere to go? And because I know my neighbor and friend Kathy, and I know the journey she's been on with the warming center, I had to say to them, well, we used to, at least on very cold nights, have some place for them to go, but now there's literally nowhere. And their jaws dropped. I mean, what do you mean literally nowhere? Isn't this a rich town? Well, yeah. I mean, I think about half of our houses are second houses from people who have more than one house. Is it really possible that such a community would have nowhere for people to go on such a cold night? I couldn't explain it to them other than to say that it was a temporary failure, and we were hopefully going to correct it. And here's the process for correcting it. I think we all want to be able to tell our children that we've risen to that challenge. I want to applaud those who have come here to speak in for and against. I don't think that anyone who's against this plan is against serving those who have needs or wants there to be homelessness. That's clearly not the case. There have been some good requests for additional consultation. What I would urge you to consider, and everyone here to consider, is that there have been 18 months, it seems, of really intense expert consultation from very well-informed and committed stakeholders that has led to this plan. I think we should go with that. I think we should trust the excellent work that has gone into this. And also, there's a lot of decisions yet to be made. It was noted earlier that the location of the supportive housing is a big question yet to be answered. Many opportunities yet to weigh in and decide on critical elements. The question is momentum and commitment. That 18-month process, we desperately need to give it forward momentum and commitment. With this funding and with this resolution, we can't just continue to live in a situation where there is no place for people to go. This has been a desperate response to a failure. We can't push it back and wait for more surveys and weeks when people may or may not hear about it. Let's move forward, ask the questions that this poses when they come up, and give folks an opportunity then to weigh in. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Brenzel.
Hello, I'm Mike Levac, and I support the town's adoption of the Homeless Action Plan and the award of the $25,000 in the budget to continue with this important effort. I do not support the scattered site homeless facilities being located in residential neighborhoods. I want to thank Nevada County for agreeing to bring any specific project to create homeless treatment centers in our residential neighborhoods to the Town Council for your review and input. I was pleased to see this very substantial change in the staff report, which is so different from the county's intention to open the Hope Ridge House in February with inadequate process or notice to neighbors. A group of concerned citizens attended educational events about the homeless plan on February 24th and April 3rd and formulated a set of questions that was delivered to the county on April 6th. Supervisor Bullock provided answers to about 70 questions via link to the website at 8:30 p.m. last evening. I appreciate the effort to respond, but scattered site homeless housing is certainly not ready for adoption by the town. Please adopt the Homeless Action Plan, but not the element of scattered site supportive housing. The approach by Nevada County regarding the scattered housing idea has felt paternalistic, a government that knows better than the citizens, not of collaboration and seeking input from our community about what's right for us. After the county abandoned its plan to unilaterally implement the Hope Ridge House, the county presentations have been didactic. This is what we're going to do, and this is why it's good for you. The thin veneer of 2 community meetings cannot substitute for true public process and dialogue. The answers to the community's questions and the time arriving at 8:30 p.m. last evening each speak for themselves. The answers were deflective, legalistic, philosophical in general when specific information was requested. Only minor felons will be allowed, was one of the responses. Finally, I will share 2 brief discussions that I had with county staff that represent disconnect. A senior member of mental health services stated to me that you can't pick your neighbors and likened the impact of scattered site homeless housing to having snowboarders move next door for a ski lease. Except in this case, the county would be picking our permanent neighbors based on their qualifications as chronically homeless, mentally ill, and substance dependent. If you think that rowdy skiers in a ski lease are like a homeless person with psychosis on meth, then you have never seen a meth addict trying to scratch their eyes out because they thought insects were inside their head. You've never cradled a homeless person's head on the concrete to protect them while they seized. And you've never lived in a homeless facility like I have done. Homeless are not bad people, but they are not rowdy skiers in a ski lease, and they don't have the same impacts on neighbors. Director Ryan Gruber told me at the public meeting April 3rd that he understood my concerns and that he would not like to have a scattered homeless facility next to his private home either. If the director of the agency responsible for promoting this idea does not want it next to his own home, common sense says we better pause. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Levac.
Hello, council members. My name is Ciro Mancuso. I've had a lot of experience with some affordable housing and workforce housing and building it, and it's been a long process for the town of Truckee to come up with its guidelines for that and to try to get some good public participation. And we still lack good housing for the workforce in Truckee. I think that this plan is an honorable plan. I totally support doing something about the homeless. I think it's our moral obligation. But I think it's a very serious question and one that needs to be given a lot of thought before it's implemented, especially when you're talking about scattered housing among our population. Number one, I can't imagine being a developer that would be cost effective. Buying houses for $750,000 to house 4 or 5 people. I don't think that's feasible. I don't think that it's doable. I do believe that the navigation center and a place for people to come for warm beds and some direction. Navigation's a good word for that because it maybe helps them navigate through what facilities and what the possibilities are that we already have. So while I support putting the $25,000 out to get keep this thing going, because a lot of people have done a lot of good work on it, I also feel like it's imperative to have full transparency and full feedback from the people that it's going to affect. And ultimately, you are the ones that are going to bear the responsibility for implementing a program that may be very, very degrading on our neighborhoods and the moral fabric of the community. So that has to be well thought out. I did have a comment about the community questions and answers as provided by the Health and Human Services Agency. I think there were a lot of very good questions placed, but I think the answers are really inadequate and very vague. And if you're relying on that document to give you direction going forward, I think somebody better make a better stab at it to get some more concise and complete answers so that you can make really good decisions. And I implore you to, as you move forward, to involve the community and give as much transparency as possible to it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Mancuso.
JD, hello. Page 12, recommendation number 3. Please adopt and get the navigation center open by December of 2025, as it states in the Homeless Action Plan. My wife and I were going to open the warming center this winter and privately fund it. We were shut down. We were told we were unable to do it, so we could not move forward. And those folks in March and April were out in the cold. I've shown you pictures of them. We took care of them. We got them housing. Some of you have the timeline wrong here, folks. Here's how it works. I'm going to tell you, a guy came to me. They have the right to do this, but is it right? That is what a town of Truckee official told me on January 13th. There was no public outreach of an off-the-record discussion I had who informed me that a shelter for the homeless called a transition house was opening in my neighborhood, and the residents would start moving in as soon as February 1st. The home was going to be supervised by video cameras only. You didn't know that, most of you, did you? And there would be no drug or alcohol testing for the 5 residents. I immediately called Jasmine Jasmine Bro from Nevada County, and she confirmed the information that was given to me and much more. On January 16th, I had a meeting with Supervisor Bullock, Ryan Groover, Jasmine Bro. In that meeting, Harding named stakeholders who did not want this type of facility near their districts. They were on that screen. That same day, I spoke with Mayor Zabriskie to express my concerns. He let me know that Nevada County thought the project would go much smoother if they moved the people in first, then notified the neighbors. There was no mention of the name Hope Ridge House during any of those conversations. January 20th, I let my neighbors know what was coming to our neighborhood via flyer knocking on doors. January 22nd, I attended the Board of Supervisors workshop. Supervisor Bullock approached me minutes prior to public comment. He asked me to change my words and not use the words homeless shelter. He asked if I had an attorney and if I wanted to save my integrity. Since that time, Nevada County has sought to discredit me and others who have spent countless hours researching this progress. After 22 years in public service, I've never seen a politician create divisiveness, hatred, and mistrust between Truckee residents and neighborhood communities like now. When elected officials use the word misinformation in such derogatory manner, it punishes and shames the people with correct information to divert the conversation to their favor. Since the plan has been put on hold, Supervisor Bullock has publicly villainized an entire neighborhood and anyone who is opposed to question his plan. Why has he not publicly villainized the Truckee stakeholders who do not want this facility near their district that was on that TV? He has used empathy and sympathy as a political war tool to move his agenda forward. Tonight, the future of Truckee's most vulnerable residents is in your hands. Please provide a clear and direct pathway on how we, the people of Truckee, can be helpful. We have the right to do something as a community. Let's do the right thing.
Thank you, Mr. Haas.
Hi, I'm Rosie McKinney-Cadu. I live at the Artist Lofts. I came here to retire up here in Truckee. And I asked my son, I says, well, is there homeless here? And he says, no. And I went walking my dog early in the morning, like at 6:30, 7 o'clock in the morning. And downtown, we had all these people sleeping in the doorways. They'd hear me walking with the dog, and they'd pop their head up, and I'd say, good morning. And they know me as the lady who said, I'm the good morning lady. They got up, they started picking up their stuff, and they knew it was time to move on, and there was no negativity. I am very, I volunteered a lot in Marin County with the homeless, so that's where I came from. And I, the navigational house, I think is a great first step, because it's a process of stepping where it's going to be successful. We don't want failure. We want success. And so what I'm suggesting is I'm all for the navigational center, and it's the way that it's structured. The way it will be where you have all these things where they can get back, the unhoused can get back to being responsible for self-care and brushing their teeth and eating, making their bed, learning how to cook. All these things they can learn in the navigational center, the way you structure it. And you'll have success. So thank you. And thank you, everybody, for being here, and thank you for the packet, because it was interesting. Thank you.
Thank you, Rosie.
Hi there. Thanks for being here tonight, and thank you for the council for listening. My name is Nicole, and I bought my home in Truckee in 2010. As a single woman, it took everything I had to make that happen. I live in one of Truckee's working-class neighborhoods, alongside teachers, tradespeople, and first-generation Hispanic families trying to stay rooted in a town that's only getting harder to afford. For most of us, our homes aren't investments. They're our only real security. That's why this proposal feels so personal. I spent the weekend reviewing the 82-page homeless proposal and attended the April 3rd informational meeting. And after all of that, I'll say this plainly. Permanent supportive housing does not belong in residential neighborhoods. Not now, not later, not under a different name. One of the biggest concerns is that this plan proposes placing unknown men, all with mental health and substance abuse issues, right next to young families and single women. This is a really big ask of our neighborhoods and feels deeply unsettling. I have listened to your argument that technically anyone could donate or rent their home for this purpose, so it's not on the town. But let's be honest, you're the ones writing the plan. You don't have to encourage it, and you don't have to build it into your strategy. Many of the most vocal supporters of this plan don't actually live in the neighborhoods being proposed. They talk about renting out second homes or donating properties, which is really just offloading the issue into someone else's backyards, like mine. Truckee's housing stock is already painfully tight, and it feels like the needs of a few are being prioritized over the broader community, the very people who keep this town running. I felt it was important to speak up tonight, because I don't think most people even realize this is happening. And for those who do, many are afraid to say anything out loud. If you're wondering why, turn to page 56 of the plan, where NIMBYism is listed as the biggest obstacle to solving homelessness. That kind of labeling doesn't invite dialogue, it shuts it down. It pressures people into silence. This isn't about saying no to people in need, it's about saying yes to a smarter, safer, and more supported solution for everyone. So I'll ask this again. Please keep permanent supportive housing from residential neighborhoods in this plan. I would also ask you to take a hard look at how the permanent supportive housing is going to affect other residents at Pacific Crest Commons. This building looks amazing. It's the gateway to our town. We want really, really good people to be living there, people just coming here for the first time, young families. It looks like an amazing new college dorm. And I want to ask you, would you want your daughter living in this building? So please also take a look at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicole.
Good evening, council members. My name is Brody Dwyer. I'm a longtime Truckee local, high school graduate from Truckee High in 2004. Repping the Truckee baseball shirt today. I'm also the former homeless outreach coordinator with Sierra Community House, and currently I'm a certified Medi-Cal peer support specialist and community advocate. I have the pleasure and privilege and honor of living in the Truckee workforce housing that was just built on Industrial. And I also care for my mother, who's a double amputee, who has the privilege of living at the Coldstream Commons, which was made possible by the public servants in this room. Understanding these community members are our neighbors who call Truckee home is, as well as understanding that approving this recommendation is the next step to be able to dive deeper on this very sensitive subject. As the plan states, this is a community issue. Therefore, the Truckee Town Council, in my opinion, has not only the right, but the responsibility to adopt their staff's recommendation. If this was an individual issue, I would advocate the council deny this recommendation. We are only 1/4 of a recession away and only one natural disaster away from a lot of our community members needing something like this in this community. Bam, the economy crashes. Your house is foreclosed because you just lost your $150,000 a year job. Sure, you have some savings, but where are you going to go when those run out? When the Tesla gets repossessed, are you going to use TART? Where would you shower if your house burned down? Where would you go for food? If your neighborhood burned down, where would you go? Would you come knock on my door over on Industrial? I'd help you. Would you like to stay, or would you like to stay in your community? Or would you rather go to Reno to receive these services when the unthinkable occurs? Our vulnerable community members have merely experienced the unthinkable. So I thank you for your diligence, your compassion, as well as your understanding. Because there's a difference between naming hard truths and allowing them to dictate the narrative. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dwyer.
Hello, my name is Dave Ria. A number of you have already read what I wrote ad nauseum. I purposely did not prepare anything tonight because I was determined I wasn't going to get up here and speak. Changed my mind. The scattered housing approach, I'm not against it. I've seen a great deal of work that people have put into things. Personally, I just think you need to start at the other end, the warming shelter. Things like what JD was talking about. There's a lot of people here, and I think everybody's highly motivated to help, and I want to help. That first meeting, I asked a question just to see how prepared everyone was, and it was, what does success look like? And the answer that I got, success looks like stability. So I really think the best way for stability, start with a warming shelter. That's easy. When you try moving somebody into housing, all too often, it's very, very difficult. I heard a story. In fact, I wrote it. A number of you have already read it. Took more than a year for this woman to move into housing. Now, I did change the name. I used the name Michael, but it was a woman. And it was just one of those things. She had a very, very difficult time. So, just to beat a dead horse, start with the warming shelter. I'm not against housing individuals. I just want everybody to understand what you're up against. As you've seen, if you've read anything that I've read or written, I am highly opinionated, and anybody that would love to hear about it, I'm willing to share, and I don't necessarily need to be right. But I want to hear where I'm wrong. So thank you all for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Ria.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor and Council members. I wasn't preparing to talk either, but got a little inspired and just kind of felt there was a few little holes that might have been missed. As many of you know, I'm a realtor locally here, and so as a realtor, my job is often to advocate for private property rights. And one concern that I know another realtor has brought up at a meeting locally is that just the issue of disclosure. And I did see in the county FAQs that it was kind of glossed over that no, it's not a disclosure item, but I kind of internally have a problem with that. Like, when my clients ask me, do I have to disclose this? Do I have to disclose that there's scattered permanent housing next to me? I think like anything that could potentially be a concern, it has to be disclosed. And I just feel that it would be a disclosure item. And if it is a disclosure item, it means it's a material fact, and it means that it could affect the value of a property. So I have a worry about that. I don't want to be in a position where my clients get sued, or I get sued, or I'm involved in a transaction where someone is placed next to a home where there could be some conflict because of it being there. So with that in mind, I want to see a solution to this problem like anyone else. Overall, the plan seems really well thought out, with the exception of the scattered supportive housing. I also worry about there being less repercussions because it's a government-controlled home. You know, if you're a private entity and you own a property, there's just ways that the government can intervene and place a lien on the property, you know, things that are, you know, out of, that are not conforming. You know, arrest can be made for someone, you know, being obviously abusing drugs or being drunk in public, et cetera, et cetera. If you have an STR, you can lose that STR permit and you're done. Whereas I just feel that there'll be some intimidation, or perhaps I just think it's going to be harder to navigate if there is a problem in a neighborhood because of one of these scattered supportive housing homes that, you know, you're kind of going to be the little guy fighting the big guy, or maybe there's 5 of you around the house, and it's just going to be really hard for a problem to get dealt with when you're dealing with the county, who, I mean, I'm sorry, but the county has more power than Joe Schmo, who the Airbnbs his property on, and in Truckee, and has to, you know, make sure he doesn't lose his permit. So I just feel like I'm concerned that could be a really long, bumpy road if this really does become a problem. And I also noticed that Claire Lane house, it seems to have like structured daily activities. Like that's the example of the house that's in the western part of the county. And it just seems like a much more thorough, like structured 24/7 supported house. I'd also like to see more examples of this actually really succeeding in a community like ours. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Brinker. Okay, that looks like all of the public comments for tonight. So now we'll come back to the council for any follow-up questions. We started to my left last time, so this time we'll start to my right with Councilmember Romack.
I don't have any follow-up questions.
Okay, I'm going to skip over to Councilmember Henderson.
Yeah, just a clarification. For the scattered supportive permanent housing, correct me if I'm wrong, but the plan isn't actually advocating for scattered supportive permanent housing, right? It's advocating for 44 total units of permanent supportive housing. There is one bullet point in there that specifically did reference the Hope Ridge house, and if that is not being pursued and we need more community conversation around that, perhaps that gets taken out. But I don't think the plan is actually, I've just searched scattered and single family, and it's not actually advocating for permanent supportive housing units, PSH units, as scattered site.
You are correct.
That's my only follow-up question. Okay, I'm pulling it up. Thank you. You want to go to someone else for questions? That was my only one.
Yep. The Councilmember Pallavi. Vice Mayor Klostad.
Just a quick question potentially for staff. For clarity, Pacific Crest, they have those 10 units, and that is a requirement of their funding. I can't remember if it was state or federal. Is that correct?
Correct.
Thank you. And that also, just for the community's information, it's that being a state-owned property, that the town really doesn't have any oversight on that. They were kind enough to come and tell us what we thought of their exterior and layout, but they get to do what they want with that property based on that program that they're working under. Just so you guys know.
Mr. Groover, I have a question for you. I heard a couple of people refer to this plan as being a process, and another person say this plan is the next step in a process. Is that a fair characterization?
The plan itself is a process. I view the plan as aspirational. One of the council members made a point earlier that we don't necessarily have the resources to do all these things all at once. So I do view it as a dynamic document that we would use and pursue those things piecemeal as the opportunities and capacity that was referenced arise.
While I have you up here, this is a bit of the tail wagging the dog, but we heard a lot about scattered housing. And I'm trying to get a sense of, my understanding is there's at least 5 single-family homes in Grass Valley alone that are providing supportive housing to 5 or 6 tenants per house. And I'm trying to understand what have been the pitfalls with that manner of housing, and is it just neutral? Is it considered a success? Just characterize it for me in case we have to address this down the road.
Sure. I think by and large, permanent supportive housing is a successful tool regardless of the sort of model and setting. We have both single-family dwellings as permanent supportive housing projects, and we have multifamily units. For instance, similar to Brown Bear Studios, purchased a motel, remodeled it, and operate permanent supportive housing there. It's extremely stable when you compare that to certainly to how people were living on the street, and in some cases to the calls for service those resources we're receiving prior to being permanent supportive housing, but they are typically very successful and stable. It's permanent housing and behavior based. If somebody's not maintaining, they're ultimately removed from the property, and they end up being stable resources that are successful in ending homelessness for those who can get into those units.
Okay, and then are problem people evicted or what?
Yeah, it's behavior based. We are required to follow housing first principles. And so if somebody's behaving in a way that's not in conformance with their rental agreement or with maintaining that stability with folks, then yes, they are ultimately removed from the project. We try to work with people and help them be successful in those units. And then when that's not possible, they do have to move.
And what overall makes that type of housing successful? Is it the level of treatment or what?
Yeah, I think it's the provision of services and the supports that are available in that, how it's operated, also the mix of people that you get in there. We try to connect people with the right resource for them. Some people are more suited for an individual unit with their own facilities, and other people benefit from a sense of community and being with other people in those units.
Okay. One thing that a couple things concern me about the town signing on to this action plan. One is the town government does not have experience in providing any treatment services. That's been county and nonprofits. And I don't see anything in here that suggests the town would be having to hire medical or people or counselors or that sort of thing.
Correct. I mean, there was talk of an MOU and establishing roles and responsibilities, and I made reference earlier that there are certain things that are always going to be in the purview of the county. So providing those mental health, behavioral health services to the people that are receiving permanent supportive housing, that's always going to be a county responsibility. The management of those properties is typically a contracted provider like North Tahoe Truckee Homeless Services or AMI Housing that's operating those projects. It's not the town that would have that responsibility for operations.
Thank you. Those are all the questions I have.
Thank you.
Okay, any other follow-up questions? Then we'll go into deliberation. Let's see, we started there. Let's, where did I start? Let's start with
I'm happy to start.
Councilmember Romack. Yeah.
Thank you. First up, thank you to everybody in this room that's participated tonight, on April 3rd, on February 7th, in January. I know a lot of time and energy has gone into this process, and that also goes to thanks to everyone in this room that has participated in the 18-month process to put together this plan. I think that was a lot of effort, a lot of work, and it's just the beginning. I think a few things that I wanted to touch on. First, housing. We know housing is a big issue. I appreciated in the presentation, I think, Chief, you spoke to the housing rainbow that we talk about a lot about and all the different needs we have in our community. And, you know, earlier tonight, we were talking about our budget, and I was just trying to do some quick math of more than $6.5 million, and it's more than that because I didn't add it all up. The town is investing of town dollars into a variety of housing programs. So I think, you know, that has been brought up. You know, there are people in this town that are struggling, that are not unhoused, and they need help. And I agree. And I think all of us up here do, and just wanted to acknowledge that I think council and staff understands that there's a broad spectrum of needs, a lot of different resources available. So I wanted to highlight that. And yet tonight we're focused on that portion of the rainbow, you know, that's under 30% AMI, and really diving in to that. I think talking about then moving on to outreach. I appreciated in the action plan, Shauna, that you spoke to the understanding that we need to do a better job of outreach, in not only for us all to understand what is the issue, what is the data, what are the resources? What are the possibilities? But then I've heard from many of you, we need to do a better job of outreach on the plans and the ideas. And, you know, I appreciate sharing ideas. I think you mentioned over there of, you know, having a little blurb that I could share on social media. Stuff like that is always great. How do we do a better job at the town to ensure that when we have outreach opportunities that we're making sure people are aware of them and, you know, really getting more folks in the community to be involved. So I definitely support that. And I know we heard a lot is that there was frustration with the Hope Ridge House and there wasn't enough community outreach. So committing, you know, the town, we are committed to outreach. We just talked about that in our budget as well, that we need to commit to more outreach, a better job, open to more ideas. Collaboration, I think this plan is great that so many people collaborated on it. I did ask that question about Placer County because I do feel like we've done a really good job in this region when we work together across jurisdictional borders with Mountain Housing Council, with the Climate Transformation Alliance, and working together. So I would really advocate that we continue to do that. And it's great. In Placer, there's the 14 units, 10 units are coming to Truckee of permanent supportive housing, and looking as a region of what makes sense next as well. So I would advocate continued collaboration in this model. I am supportive of moving forward with this roadmap today. I think, again, the effort that has been put into it has been good. More effort is needed. But as was discussed earlier, this is a roadmap. As any next phases of plans or specifics would come up, that would come back to council. And I know we would be committed to having more outreach and more opportunities for people to being involved. So I think we should move forward. I do appreciate too that, you know, the focus on navigation center services, community engagement and outreach that we already talked about. But I think I heard from a lot of folks tonight that there was support of we should have a navigation center, we should have beds for those that need them in emergencies. So support moving forward with that. And I really appreciate everyone who came here tonight and is solutions oriented and coming up with some great ideas. And I do want to encourage you to continue to participate in this process, because a reminder is, I feel like anywhere in Truckee, there are going to be people who live nearby. We could be talking about Pioneer Commerce Center and there are people who live there. We could be talking about downtown and there are people that live there. So also understanding we are going to be talking about neighbors to any project somewhere in our town. And I think that's just something that we do have to understand and find out where is the best place to put resources, where is the best place to put services. And therefore, again, I would encourage everyone in this room to continue to stay engaged, participate in that process. So you can share your thoughts and reasons why this might be better than this. And then finally, yeah, I would support moving forward with the $25,000 as well. I think having resources dedicated to this, knowing, again, any additional resources would come back to council. There would be another chance for the public to weigh in. I think that's it for now.
Okay. So I'll start just by saying that this isn't the first time the town of Truckee has invested in services and housing for some of our most vulnerable community members. Councilmember Romack talked a bit about some of our investments sort of broadly in housing. We've invested and brought forth 31 housing units for individuals at or below 30% AMI, and we have 10 more coming online with Pacific Crest Commons, which breaks ground this year. The town invested $1.2 million into Pacific Crest Commons alone, not to mention the financial investments in other housing projects. And that's very much that housing piece of those sort of pillars that you saw in one of the slides. I'm really glad that this action plan, this roadmap has come forward and is before us. I think like many of you probably in this room, wish we could have had these discussions even earlier and more proactively, but I am glad that we're here now, right? As a community coming together. And what I am hearing tonight is we do all care about this and we want to solve it. And we might not all agree on exactly how to get there, but we're all invested in figuring out what that looks like, right? Because at the end of the day, we're trying to get to some very real results around this. So I just want to take a few items one at a time. The first is the navigation center versus dedicating resources to a warming center, which I heard come up sort of repeatedly tonight. Kathy Foley and I spoke about this, Cindy Basso and I spoke about this exact issue, and I just want to sort of highlight that a key challenge with the warming center is finding an entity who's willing to staff it when they can't plan for when weather is going to trigger that. That's really hard to staff, and honestly, it's not a great business model, right? For an entity to enter into a contract and say, yes, we'll staff something a handful of nights during a 4-month period, and we don't know when those nights are going to be. That's just really, really challenging from a business model perspective. So my understanding is that the navigation center is higher priority than, for example, just focusing on the warming shelter. The navigation center is also meeting sort of a true need. It's a true solution to a problem that we're faced with, as opposed to a bit more of a Band-Aid solution. We're just going to operate something a few nights during the winter. So that's the first one I wanted to address. The scattered supportive housing sites, obviously a lot of mixed reactions to that potential model, and definitely a need for more information on what that model looks like, where they're located, how they operate, guidelines, rules, all of those pieces. Several of you here tonight and in the written public comments that we received asked for the removal of the scattered supportive housing sites within the plan. And I'm not necessarily supportive or opposed to them. I think there's more sort of conversation that we need to have, again, what these models actually look like, specifics around sites, et cetera. My concern with fully removing it, I'll just say, is that because it's a by right allowed use, which the state has dictated, I worry a little bit that if we remove it fully, it sets up a false expectation with our community that that will never happen here. When in fact, a nonprofit, a faith-based organization, anyone could come in and do that. So I want to be cognizant that we're not setting false expectations as well when we think about what is and isn't in this plan. As you heard, we can't disallow those. The action plan itself talks about the single-family residence model for permanent supportive housing in, and thank you to everyone, page 21, I think it was, Focus Area 2, Strategy 1, which describes move forward with securing a single-family residence in Truckee, leveraging state funds to create 5 to 6 units of permanent supportive housing. I do think that that phrase needs to be removed from the plan, or we could adopt with an amendment noted tonight, because the county has stated they're not moving forward with this. There's a need for more community discussion around this. And so I don't want to adopt something when we've sort of heard that we need more community conversation around this, and the county's not pursuing that anyways. So why would we adopt something where we're saying it's not moving forward anyways? I think we could, if the direction is to adopt, potentially just amend that. The plan calls for getting to a total of 44 units of permanent supportive housing, and we clearly do need those. So I support retaining permanent supportive housing units in the plan, which I think are captured in strategies 2 and 3, right? So continue to support Pacific Crest Commons. That's going to be 10 units of permanent supportive housing. I'm very comfortable with that strategy within that focus area 2. And then strategy 3 is identify future opportunities to create permanent supportive housing inventory based on need as our system evolves. I do say it would be great if we could have more specificity in that, and maybe we can even add something, working with partners is the tactic, but it's working with partners and the community to support the development of affordable housing. I think that part is really, really important. Okay, I'm almost done, I promise. Community process and outreach. I'll just say that no government entity is infallible, just as individuals are imperfect. So are government agencies, right? We all make mistakes, and when we make mistakes, it's incumbent upon us to own those mistakes, to take responsibility, and to learn from those mistakes. So it's my deep hope that a learning coming from the Hope Ridge House experience was that this community expects, and rightfully so, really robust community outreach and engagement. And we know how to do that, right? We actually do that really well in a lot of areas. Something as simple as our dark skies efforts to much more complex, hard to have conversations around short-term rental regulations. That was a really, really challenging community conversation, if you remember, just a couple of years ago, right? And our community members, unhoused and housed, deserve to be heard, deserve to share their opinions in civil, respectful discourse, and deserve to be given information so that they can also make their own informed decisions and come to their own perspectives. So tonight, I would say part of what we're doing, that's part of community engagement and outreach, right? But we also know it's not enough. We heard from I have heard from all of you, it's not enough. Public comment's awkward. You only get 3 minutes. We don't get to actually engage in a robust dialogue. We don't get to really get into the nitty gritty of things. And that's really important. So whether that's holding public workshops where we can dig into these different issues, where all of these viewpoints can be looked at with compassion for everyone, right? And of course, there are a lot of other different ways that we can go about that type of public outreach to really ensure full transparency and accountability, right? Lastly, I just want to comment on funding. We're being asked to make what's a relatively nominal $25,000 investment, and it's obvious that this plan is going to need to be resourced to achieve any real results. $25,000 will support the next phase of a process, but it's not going to deliver actual outcomes to address homelessness in our region. And so as we move into budgeting at the town, which is happening over the next 4 to 8 weeks or so, I'd like us all to be thinking about that. I don't know if there's an opportunity to make a different type of investment. I don't know if that's a $250,000 investment. I'm not sure what that is, but something that could actually achieve meaningful and tangible outcomes, because so often we invest in process, and I want us to invest in outcomes on this. So those are some of the things I really wanted to make sure I said. I know that was a lot.
Vice Mayor Klovestock.
Thank you. I think my fellow council members captured my interests and intentions. So thank you for all you said. Don't need to repeat it all. I think that's an interesting concept on the amendment. Obviously, we haven't talked about that. I'm interested in hearing other council members' opinions on that. And, you know, I mean, it's clear this is not an easy decision, but we need to have the political will to make the hard decisions to make our community better. And that's what this council, I think, does consistently. So thank you, everybody, for being here tonight. And I look forward to hearing from my fellow council members on the amendment. Otherwise, I'm in full support of adopting the plan.
The basic bones of this action plan are...
Mayor? Pallavi?
That's okay.
Sorry, Dave.
I'm easily
Councilmember
forgotten over
Pallavi.
here.
It's late.
It's nice and quiet.
My apologies.
That's okay.
It's almost 10.
It's all good.
Yeah.
I'll try to be as brief as I can. So just to quickly comment on the plan and Councilmember Henderson's, I do think it probably makes sense to at least strike strategy 1, but leave 2 and 3, in my opinion. I'm totally fine with that. Strategy 1 is sort of written with a move forward with securing a single family residence. I don't know if that specifically applies to the Hope Ridge House, but I think strategy 3 maybe captures the essence of what we're trying to do. So I am supportive of that. I think that makes sense. I just had a couple other comments. Super complex and sensitive issue. Compassion is one of my first reactions on a lot of this, as I sit front and center to the issue on a fairly daily basis. For any of you know what my business is. We just budgeted over $40 million in the 4 hours prior to this meeting. And so to me, talking about $25,000 in funding to continue a process with a target for a navigation center, I do approve. I support those 2 bullets 100%. And I think really the major question here is, how do we adopt the plan? Are we making changes? Are we not adopting? I also just really want to assure the community that this council has heard you loud and clear. I believe the county has also heard a lot of the concerns loud and clear, and that we are all interested in pursuing the right process and the right solutions that help all people when they need it most at the end of the day. Truckee, we are not ending homelessness in California or Nevada, but we can certainly affect change And that's really what we've been doing up here, to Councilmember Klofstad's statements. A lot of the values that we do hold are to spearhead positive change. We do that all the time. Our budget is an incredible reflection of that. We're here to solve problems. We're here to provide opportunities for all citizens. And we're here to congratulate Placer County. And we never do that. We never say Placer County did something that's effective and like responsible budgetarily and is solving problems before we did. Like, it's awesome to finally look at those apartments in Kings Beach, in an unincorporated part of the county that has probably the most challenge of any Eastern Placer County community. And they are working on this issue and have cited a supportive housing location right in downtown Kings Beach. And I lived there for 10 years, and I'm super, super incredibly proud that they've done that, and that we're here as a region at the table with this plan. And this is not, for the first time, the first plan that's like, Truckee's going to solve all the problems in Placer County. He's just going to be over here. Placer County stepped forward first. So I do think we have a responsibility to adopt this plan. As we've all said, it's a roadmap. It's a 15-year roadmap. To assure you also that the $40 million plus and that we just talked about, literally out of our entire budget, we've allocated $25,000 to this, which isn't going to accomplish very much. And that's the challenge. But I think what we've heard is we need to pause, we need to listen, we need to do more outreach and just educate. And I think that's what really this is reflecting. So I'm actually pretty comfortable with everything in there. And honestly, strategy 1 is also fine with me. It reads a little bit like it's really like focused on Hope Ridge House. And so that's why I'm supportive of striking that and just leaving maybe the last 2 in there. And I just want to be here I just want to be clear that the town's going to engage. We're here to listen. We're here to advocate for everybody in our community. And we're going to do our best to find balanced approaches to all of that. And at the end of the day, if the state usurps our control on yet another item, like, I'm really sorry about that too, because we're working really hard to adhere to all of that. So I'll leave it at that and determine how you guys want to handle strategy 1, or if we have a third, that would be the easiest. Thank you. And thank you all for being here and hanging out with us. So almost 10. We get to do it a lot.
Now I'll go ahead. Thank you. Yeah, I think the plan has really great bones. It's the housing first approach, which is the most prevalent and most successful approach across the nation. So actually, that's kind of easy. It's not as if we're going off into left field with something that diverges with what's been shown to be the most successful approach. And it looks to me like we've right-sized it, and it's a proven way of handling things. So the basic goals I agree with. The strategies I agree with. I look at strategy 1 as referring to Hope Ridge House, which I consider a dead issue. And I'd like the minutes to reflect that I treat strategy 1 as referring to Hope Ridge House. And I would simply keep the option open to address any form of single-family residence as supportive housing as on a case-by-case basis. And so it's a matter of how to word that.
Can we hear from the county and maybe the committee that
What do you want to
developed
ask
this
them?
on that?
We can. What do you want to ask them? What their recommended language is?
Well, how, and is that the case? Is this strategy 1 specific to Hope Ridge House? Okay, and could we just amend this from move forward to consider, which seems like it's strategy number 3 as well. What would be the difference other than the home key plus funding source?
Okay, great conversation. And I agree that strategy 1 is in relationship to Hope Ridge House, and that the intention of continuing to work on permanent supportive housing is covered in strategy 3. I guess to keep the conversation as open as possible, I would recommend that strategy 1 is omitted, strategy 2 it becomes 1, and strategy 3 becomes 2, but we get rid of the tactic because it's too specific. So that strategy 3 on page 21 would say, identify future opportunities to create permanent supportive housing inventory based on needs and community input as our system evolves, and just get rid of the tactic because
There's a risk in the tactic. I agree.
It's just too specific, and it doesn't keep the conversation open based on like the need and.
Right.
So.
And just to clarify, I think I heard you say based on need and community input,
Yes,
adding that in.
adding that.
I really
adding that.
appreciate that. Thank you.
Yes.
I think that sounds great. I like that change.
I would be comfortable
I mean,
with
I
that.
am speaking for the committee, but I think we're all, I know the intention behind it, and we're just trying to keep options open and a plan that everyone can support.
So where did I leave
Somebody
off?
want to make a motion?
I had one last thing. It's already captured in the staff recommendation. It's accept the homeless action plan with the initial focus on the navigation services. So that
Are you going to go on record saying navigation center services? And I'm asking seriously, that isn't in jest, because I know you are one of the strongest advocates for like warming shelter and all of the temporary things. And so hearing you say navigation, I think helps all of us proceed more effectively as well, and not continue to argue about like which solution is the best solution. So I'm being genuinely serious that you are standing by
I'd
that.
like the recommendation as written with the additional edit of the action plan, that our position is strategy 1 should be stricken, and the tactic under strategy 3, which will be the new 2, should be stricken, and the third thing would be add, what was it, with community input. Yeah.
Staff's got that.
Are we good?
I think we have it.
So we accept the report with those modifications? So moved.
Seconded.
All in favor?
I don't
Aye.
know what we're doing.
Aye.
And then the
we
rest
voting?
is all aye.
Maybe give this a bit more structure. So I heard a recommendation to accept the plan in a second. Was there a motion to direct the funding and to prioritize navigation center services?
Yes.
And who made that motion?
I guess I
I
did.
think it's what's in front of us.
Were you
It's
moving
what's in
all
front
of
of us.
staff's?
It's the whole thing of
Okay.
what's in front of us with the 3 changes to the action plan.
Okay. And that's what the seconder thought they were seconding.
Yes.
And did everybody vote?
Yeah, everyone nodded their head.
Okay, let's do, please call for the vote so that it can be official.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Romack?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Klostad?
Yes.
Mayor Zabriskie?
Yes.
Councilmember Henderson?
Yes.
And Councilmember Pallavi?
Yes.
Can I just confirm who made the motion and who seconded?
Here, we won't tell.
We're not really sure. I think Councilmember.
I
You
made the
made the motion. The
I
mayor made the motion.
The
And
vice mayor
seconded.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Thank you.
Wasn't sure.
So that's the end of the discussion items. We can do council reports.
Yes, let's do council reports. Who wants to start?
I can start. I'm ready. I only attended 2 meetings over the last 2 weeks. Climate Transformation Alliance quarterly meeting in Kings Beach this time, The focus was transportation. We had a presentation from TTUSD Transportation Director on their electric bus program and mass movement programs. TRPA presented on their transportation master plan. Palisades Tahoe presented on their various programs to reduce traffic from their to and from their resort. And finally, Truckee North Tahoe Transportation Management Association presented on all their efforts to corral the cats on the varied programs, agencies, and needs of transportation in this region. And then I also attended the Lunch and Learn hosted by the Chamber of Commerce on sustainable practices for businesses. Keep Truckee Green team did a great job on their presentation, and the attendees were very engaged, especially on the single-use water bottle ban, which is effective today.
I'll jump in. I attended Good Morning Truckee last week. Was that last week? Great conversation on some resources around mental health, sober living in our community, Gateway Mountain Center, Speedy Foundation. So great presentation of the plethora of nonprofit resources we have in our community, which is great. And then a lot of conversations around a variety of issues on our agenda tonight. That's it.
I attended the Nevada County Solid and Hazardous Waste Commission down in Nevada City. A huge portion of that meeting was devoted to just fuels reduction and how we're getting that waste or resource, I guess, depending on how you look at it, out of the forests and out of neighborhoods for fuels mitigation work. I have continued working with different jurisdictions around adoption of the resolution related to the wildfire risk and federal opposition to the funding freezes. And then last Friday, I mentioned earlier, Mayor Zabriskie, Jen, and then David Diamond, who's from the airport board, Ted Owens from the hospital, several others. We all went down as a delegation and met with Representative Kiley down in Rockland to advocate for the funding for specific projects that have been held up. And we had some great other folks join us as well. Some of the folks from Nevada City, from Grass Valley, the mayor of Mammoth drove all the way out for it. So I'm very, very grateful to Mayor Bubser. And it was a good meeting, and we will continue our advocacy on that front.
We had a visit Truckee Tahoe board meeting, discussed our strategic plan and potential budgets. And that was about it. Thank you.
And I joined Lindsay to see the Good Morning Truckee, and I agree that was a great series of presentations on addressing mental health through various groups. And then was interviewed for the river revitalization meeting on what our ultimate action plan should be there. Met with the mayors of Grass City and Nevada City and the chairman of the Nevada County Board of Supervisors to discuss justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion in terms of moving a committee forward among the four of us. Attended the mayor manager's breakfast with Jen down in Nevada City. As Courtney mentioned, I met him for Kevin Kiley for the first time, and Courtney described it really well, and I kind of think I agree with her. It's hard to say what the result was, what we got out of it, but we're going to keep working on it. So that's it. That's it. We can adjourn into what's. Yes. What's our closed session? Where's the agenda?
Closed session is real property negotiations concerning a parcel of land owned by the town on West River Street. Under consideration or price and terms.
Okay. Before we move into closed session, do we have any public comments on that item? Seeing none, we'll adjourn into closed session.